not
This
only
conference will now be recorded.
Apologies.
oh, it's okay. I was wondering if I was doing something wrong. I thought I was going to say like you've been disconnected, and I had to figure out how to log back, and then like the whole thing was going to be just a big tech disaster. No, no, I've done a lot of lectures. I've done workshops in person and stuff like that. But it's nice to be able to do this from home. I got little kids, and so traveling around. I remember there was one 6-month period when I was working at Target, and I did I don't know, it was like 9 or 10 different lectures around the country, and I was flying like 2 or 3 places a month, and it was getting to the end of it, and my wife was just like, "This is awful." She's like, "You're never here." And then my boss was even like, my boss, I remember he came to me at Target, he's like, "Hey, when's the Allan Peters show gonna end?" And I was like, "Oh crap." Okay, enough of this. And so I haven't really done a ton of speaking in the last few years, so it's really nice to be able to do this online. And I appreciate, I work from home, so a lot of my clients are around the country, so I'm doing video chats and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool that everybody's doing it now. So thanks for showing up. What I'm going to do is, guys, I'm going to go through. It'll go really quick, but it's about 45 pages or so, where I'm going to walk you through kind of like who we are, what we do, and that's just a little bit of that, like a few slides, and then just break into overall. Here's like my process, start to finish, about making a logo, designing a badge, where I find inspiration, picking colors, all that, and then that'll probably be the first 20 minutes, half an hour, and then we're going to break into and have all the rest of the time, hour and a half, however long it is, step by step, to go through it with you guys. You guys will be able to ask as many questions as you want. And speaking of that, since you're all here, and usually with like a presentation where you're talking to like hundreds of people at once or something, usually they're like, just like wait till the end and do a question and answer. But for some reason, like there's only 21 of you guys, so like if you have a question and you can interrupt me, we had a lot of time, and that way you don't forget, or else just take a note and we'll get to it later on. All right, I'm gonna share my screen, and is that working for you guys? You can see what I'm looking at here. Badge building workshop. It should be badge building. What you call it? Badge building boot camp. That's what it should be.
Boot camp.
I know. Screwed it up here. All right. Cool. Full screen mode. Better. All right. I've got my Twitter, my Instagram handle on there, but you guys probably know that. You guys showed up here. So, Pete, this is the one slide I'm going to read. They always say like never ever put something on a slide and then just read it. It's the most boring thing for your viewer, but I'm just going to do it anyways. I think my wife wrote this, and so it was a bunch of jumbled thoughts from myself. It really put together in a beautiful way, and I'd never say it as eloquently as the way she wrote it. It says, Peters Design Company is a creative branding and design agency based in the heart of the Midwest. We offer a distinctive design aesthetic and engaging messaging that is both genuine and thought-provoking. Everything we create is crafted with care and excellence in mind. Our design aesthetic is influenced by the great thinkers of the past. We have a deep admiration for a time when craftsmanship was king and artists took great pride in their trade. Designs were handmade, and this impeccable quality still lives on today. Our aim is to bring back this dedication to craft in our own work. We are a different kind of branding agency, built on authenticity, not complacency, craft, not indifference, integrity, not insincerity. Central to our collaborative process is an earnest desire to get to know our clients, and everything we create is infused with a distinctiveness that is uniquely personal to each of our partners. And so that if that sounds like gross agency mumbo jumbo, like that, you're like, oh my gosh, eye roll, like get over with it. Like this is, even though it might sound so, it sounds so beautiful the way my wife put it together. It's everything in there is the truth. That's how we feel. We really love getting into the craft. I spend way too long on designs and drawings and sketches and just trying to get the right idea and just digging in and like making just like filling notebooks with stuff. I really care about the final product. I don't get my next client unless I do a good job on the client that I'm working on currently. I always try to make every project my best project and evolve each time. Okay. And then the last part in there about basically broing out with our clients, making sure that it's friendship first. You know, that's really important to us too. You know, the best way to come up with a good product is to know your client well. And the only way you're going to do that is if you get to be friends with them, you get to know them well, you spend time with them. And that way they open up a little bit and you really can dig in. You can learn so much more about the project, about their brand, and you get a better product in the end. So all that is important. And I'm not saying I'm friends with my clients just to get a better product, to be crystal clear. Like honestly, a buddy of mine, Bob Casserly, he's like made his living as like an amazing salesman. And he's like such a nice guy. And I was like, Bobby, how the heck do you do it? How are you so good at your job? And because he's like made companies, like huge ones, and he just moves on and then just like blows them out. They get huge every time he works for him because he just brings in so much clientele. And he says, Allan, like the most important thing is get invited to the wedding. If you can get invited to the wedding, everything else will fall into place. You know, be their friend first and foremost. And it's not about like, there's no trickery involved. Just be really nice and listen. So, all right, we're like 10 minutes in. I'm on one slide. It'll go faster. We work on a lot of big clients. I worked at Target for many years, and one of the cool things I got to do there is their core branding. I got to really like come up with a lot of the look and feel for them, and that's helped catapult me into working with lots of other great clients since then. I work with Google all the time, work with Amazon quite a bit. I've done a couple great projects with Disney, and just even like some big ones like this year we were working with Freddie Mac. I mean, that's like a multi-trillion-dollar company. And I just started some work on GM. You know, just like cool clients. It's some really big, amazing stuff. And we do that stuff, but we also work on a lot of small mom and pop clients. Like I branded a lot of churches since we've started our own agency. I work on a lot of small tech companies, a lot of brands that you might have never heard of, startups and things like that. And so a full mix. I put here as like, I've designed a couple of logos over the years. And I've actually designed a lot more than this. There's a bunch here. It's funny, I got to this page and my son Matthew, he was like, wow, Dad, that's crazy. And but the thing is, you guys know, especially if you guys are designing logos, over like 10 years, you design a lot of logos, especially all the ones that don't get used, or if you're doing this stuff for fun on the side and you're doing passion projects, or like lately I've been since like quarantine, I started which is like the worst time probably to start a business period. But I started an online store or a shop on my site, and been selling all sorts of merch and making like tons of hats and shirts and posters and stuff like that. And because of that, I'm just able to design a lot of fun stuff in between other projects. And so like I'm constantly making and building, and I've kind of been like that all my life. Even like when I was a kid in high school, I would, this sounds awful, but like I would sometimes like skip some of the classes that I found more boring, and I'd go draw all day. And I just loved drawing, and I still do. I love making stuff. I like being productive and creating things. So here's a key thing to keep in mind. A simple icon is a must-have, and this is something I always tell clients. Here's just like a selection of just like the icons from a mark. You see a lot of logos that over the years, there's been tons in the past, especially a lot of fashion brands and stuff like that, where it's just typography. There's no icon that goes with that. And that was fine for years with print and ads and things like that. It wasn't a big deal. But now that everything, like one of the first places you're going to see, or the first place you're probably going to see any brand is going to be on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or on a mobile application. And you get, if you look at this next page here, like if you look at this Firecraft mark, if it has an icon and you can throw that into a little avatar, that's legible. You get over here on the right and it's nice and small. That's obviously not legible. Same with this threshold logo. Big old Target I did for, or big old brand I did for Target. It was like a $6 billion brand. They're number one home brand that they have. And this key was the key icon for it, and without it, like especially words that have more than like 4 letters, you're really going to want an icon in this day and age. That said, if you're designing a badge for a T-shirt or something like that, or if you're just designing it for a poster or like a one-off situation where it's not a brand for a company, well then obviously you wouldn't necessarily need an icon for that. And I do a lot that are like that too. They're just like full on like type and circles and things like that. So when I'm designing an icon, I start with a brand noun list, and I put here like, what's a brand noun? Person, place, or thing that can be distilled down to an icon or represent your brand. Now, you'd think that like every client that you run into would know what a noun is. You learn it in school. It's pretty basic English. Person, place, or thing. But I've had many times where like if I don't explain what a noun is, like not a lot, but there's been situations where they come back with tons of words that aren't nouns. They're like, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean that I can't have like craftsmanship as one of my words? It's important that every single of these words could define what the logo icon could be. It can be distilled down to an icon. So an example here, City of Shoreview. This is a city I branded here in the Twin Cities. I have these classifications. These obviously aren't nouns. They're just like categories that have words in. But the nouns are like trees, oak trees, parks, open space. Now, open space, is that a noun? Not really, but like the idea of open space in a mark. I mean, you can see how visually it could come to life. Trails, human silhouette, waves, ripples, reflection, lake, the letter S. Both these activities are verbs, but if you had like a walking person or a running person, you get the idea. Like they could be distilled down to an icon. And so one of the really key important things when I'm working with a client, I'm coming up with a brand noun list, or even if you're doing it for yourself, is I just start like any kind of brainstorming. Just go broad, get everything you could think of for this brand, and then go back and narrow it down. So I always tell all my clients, like with a city, I'm working with the whole city council. So I'm asking every single person to contribute to come up with anybody who's going to be saying yes or no to the client or to the final product. I say they should be involved in coming up with, or at least have the opportunity to add nouns. Because that way they feel like they got their fingerprint on it without having to like make some random revision later on. They feel like they influenced where the market is going. So this is a great way to bring in clients and get them in at the ground level where they can really affect the final product without affecting it by destroying it later on. Because that happens a lot. It happened a lot in my early career because number one, I was working at agencies where somebody else was selling my work, and I might not even be in the pitch meeting where it's being sold. And then also, this thing with the client wasn't being involved in this part of it. And this is so key. And the most important part isn't coming up with a brand noun list. It's getting on the phone with your client and narrowing it down to 10 to 15. Even if you get narrowed down to like 5, that's even better. And really define what the sketches you're going to be doing are going to be. So you're not wasting your time drawing stars when they don't want a logo with a star in it, and 2/3 of your ideas that you're presenting have stars in it. So saves you a lot of stress later on. And so then I take get this narrowed down, approved brand noun list, and I jump into doing sketches. And sometimes I do sketches and pencil sketches. Sometimes I do them geometric like this. Here, I can get this. And so you can see right here I'm taking my brand noun list. I'm taking those words that we had right here on my last slide. Oops, can I go back? Why did my arrows not? There we go. Sorry, my cursor wasn't working for some reason. So right now you look at these, you're seeing like, oh, it's a shoreline and a pine tree for number 1. Here you're seeing is a tree and a shoreline. They wanted something that was an update of what they currently had, where they had like a full on, they had like this super detailed illustration with gradients and stuff like that was impossible to reproduce and couldn't be distilled down to one color. So some of these, a leaf, a drop, a droplet of water, waves, an S, a tree, and waves. So I'm taking the things from the noun list, and I'm usually, sometimes it's a straight up thing like, hey, it's a tree. I grabbing the tree out there, but a lot of the times I'm taking multiple nouns and I'm trying to find visual overlap, and then finding a juxtaposition between those two things where I bring it together and create something new. Because like the moment you're like, hey, I'm just going to make a tree in a shape, I'm sure there's a lot of people who've made a tree in a shape before. Is your tree in a shape more unique than theirs? I'm sure you're gonna have, like, if they'd pick number 10 here, that somebody out there would come back and be like, hey, I made a really similar tree in a shape, and it might be a problem. Where if you're combining it or they're adding a little bit more subject matter to it, there's a lot more ownability in like number 5 here, where you got the leaf and the ripples. And so they picked this one right here, and then I just have a slide here with a revision. Usually, like with my clients, I always say, pick 3 of them, and then I'll do full brand systems for each of those, and then you'll select one of those, and then we do a couple rounds of revision and really just refine it. And so you're seeing the refining here. You're seeing like obviously my sketches are a little bit more rough, but then when I get in there and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be on a water tower. This is like a big deal. It's important. People are gonna say that, like, that's my city, and they're gonna point to this mark, and it's super important, right? I want to make sure that it is as good as possible. And honestly, I love making logos. I want to make it as good as possible too. And to tell you the honest truth, this was not one of my favorite of the last round of these. Like, I really like 14 here. I think 12's awesome. 5's really great. 2 has 1 and 5. It's like there's a lot of them that are simpler, and there's some complexity going on here. And I was like, how do I make that better? Like, these have rounded terminals. These trees look kind of cartoony. There's not a consistency in here and to the outside. The line weight's thinner here, thicker here, and thinner here. The negative space in here is really chunky. It gets thin and thick and thin and thick, and this is consistent. And then the negative space here it gets a little wider. So I was like, okay, I can fix that. I can take this line, the line having the inside, and basically what I was doing is establishing, and I'll talk about this a lot later, the overall brand language that I can apply to everything else. So I'm like, okay, this tree has a brand language, right? It has these lines running through it. I have this geometry where I'm using this specific line weight in here, right? And so then I'm applying that out here. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. They always say, like, simplicity is using fewer strokes, right? And so you can see right here how this line shares with this line. So I'm trying to overlap, just double up there, so I'm able to say the same thing with fewer elements. Also, like, if you look at the bottom, the way these lines come in, see how gappy it is here. And right here, if you look at just the edge from here, ding, 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 it's a perfect rhythm. They're spaced out really nicely. Is this line weight in between consistent? No, but like the line weight of these is, the balance is perfect. And when you step back, or if you see this smaller, it looks very consistent. It's I love the way it turned out. And it's funny, I would have never got to this had they not picked this one that I didn't like that much. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even if a client does like pick the one that's not your favorite, never give up on a project, because it can still be amazing. Just like figure out how to fix the problem. And honestly, one of the best things about designing is getting a difficult problem, and then the moment you crack it and you're just like, yeah, it's like the best feeling when you when you solve something where it just like obviously there's some glaring issues with this, and I was able to fix them all, and yeah, it came out great. I love it. So hunting for inspiration is this next one. We're going to talk about like how where I find a lot of my inspiration from, where I dig for it, and I'm going to talk about batch hunting, some things like that. I quickly wanted, because I have it up, I wanted to talk about this specific markup here. So why is this interesting to me? If I found this in the wild, like if I found this at an antique store and my grandmother's attic or something like that, or digging in somebody's garage at a garage sale, or and I dig this up, like, why is this interesting to me? This old logo that's not being used anymore. Some things that when I look at that, there's a lot of learning. So they're using a brand language here. They have a sans serif here, sans serif here. They have this script erector here. And if you look at the background of this matches the same overall feeling of the word erector. It looks like the same artist drew it. I always say, like, when you're designing something, all the elements should feel like they came from the same hand, the same artist's hand. A lot of times you see like a logo designed where the icon doesn't match the typography. They look like just kind of mashed together. They might be a nice pairing, but they don't look like that the same person made them. It just looks like they're kind of smashed together. And I think it's really important to have a balance between the two, between the icon and the typography and the subhead and any elements, the outside of a badge, if you have a badge in there, like the overall shape, all of it should be speaking that same brand language. And so you can see that like this is obviously this erector is in a font that's, somebody hand lettered that. And the same artist also drew this line around the outside, which ties the whole thing together. If that was just this Gilbert logo in a circle, I don't think there would be the same balance where you're getting like scripty, sans serif, scripty, sans serif, where you get that nice visual rhythm. So just jumping in, I pulled out some examples to talk about like things I look for when I'm going and hunting for inspiration, whether it's on Pinterest, whether it's on, actually, I do a lot of my looking now and a lot of my saving. Like my folders on my Instagram are jam-packed. I have like thousands of things in every folder, and I have these very detailed, organized inspiration folders on Instagram. If for some reason it got erased, I would be mortified. And honestly, I should make sure that I keep backing up. I screenshot stuff and I use it all the time. But like whenever I'm working on a mood board or anything, like I'll always jump back in there. And there's a lot of stuff that's modern and it's not necessarily vintage. But in this case, a lot of these, I think every photo on here is I may have photographed. There might be a couple things that I found on Instagram that other people have posted to badge hunting and stuff like that. But so this is all different badge shapes, just ideas for like I might look at it, I might say like, obviously this is just like a nice circle, but it's balanced. The way this eagle, I love that this eagle completes the circle on the bottom here, even the inside of it, the way the union arcs and then makes a little space for the word chess. The negative space, the way the A bleeds into the outside ring, and you really see this overlapped A and the negative space created there. This Ohio one's really cool. You like a lot of people are just like default and say, hey, I'm making a badge. I'm gonna put it in a circle and I'm gonna have a word on the top and a word on the bottom and put an icon in the middle, right? Throw like the established date on the outside and I'm good to go, right? Yeah, you can do that, but if your whole portfolio is filled with nothing but that, it's gonna get old really quick. Even if you are switching out the fonts, people will be like, hey, I know what you're doing there. It's you do the same thing every time. And it's not appropriate for my brand, and I want something custom and special that doesn't look like something else you did for somebody else. I want it to be uniquely my brand. And so you look at this Ohio one, like that's cool. It has this oval in the background. There's this big slab over the top of it, and another brick, down here. Jumping ahead, typography lockups. I threw some of these in here. You see so much of this, just like typography inspiration. And when I'm talking about type inspiration in here, I'm not necessarily talking about fonts. I'm talking about, like these beautiful lockups, like this UST, and then there's a GD here. Obviously, you can see that. I love this McNess ligature, just ligatures and stuff like that. I'm looking just like for the way they're balancing things out, the way this type is worked into the shape, or using a letter as a shape container to put all this information in, which I think is pretty great. Custom typography. So I threw up some examples here specifically. Or like, hey, here's a nice chunky industrial one. This Kenmore one's really cool. It actually looks pretty modern. I could see this for like a brand new, like anything that just was coming out right now. And I honestly, I haven't seen anything quite like this recently. I should have kept this secret and not shown you guys. I'm just kidding. This Grand Central and the tram, they got nice curves and stuff to them. I like this little detailing in here. Look at this crazy M. But even though it's kind of crazy, it's M. It has the same circle that you have in the O and the P and the A and even the arc and the R. Obviously, you could do like a double rounded corner M that would get the same effect. But this is just so unique and special. Like I've never seen this M used quite like that before. I love these slab serifs, so they're all linking the letters together for this designed by Alexander Gerard piece for Herman Miller. See, I knew who did it because it says specifically who did it. And then type and shape. I always love looking for types and shape, you know, like the way it works in. This is so, it takes a long time to do. Anything that takes a while to do, most designers aren't going to take the time to do it. They're just like, whatever, you know, like I'm not, you know, like they're going to find out of the can typeface. But if you're spending a little bit more time on it, it all of a sudden it makes it that much more special. It's like what I was talking about in that intro about craftsmanship. And really like putting in the time to make something right. Yeah, hardwood here could just be a condensed font right across the middle, but the fact that arcs in there and matches those shapes, it just looks way the heck cooler. It makes you want to read it. It enforces that word and makes it more impactful. The way phonographic comes here, I mean, like look how nicely that's done too. And they're not squishing it. This isn't a effect. It's not like they're just doing like bulge up and bulge down or the effects thing in Illustrator. Obviously, this is like, you know, probably hand done from the time. But if you're doing that now in Illustrator, like you can look at how the strokes stay consistent throughout. You know, they're not squishing any of those letters. Like if you were to do that effect, like this middle stroke on the H or the vertical, the horizontal strokes on the P here would get so squished, it would look awful. And this doesn't look awful. And it's done very well. And so application, like how do I take that and apply it? You know, how do I apply it when I'm making a mark, right? And so here's just some examples, like, hey, unique shapes, you know, not that this is like inspiring this shape specifically, but you know, like, hey, I look for unique shapes, and like, you know, sometimes, especially like in this case where this was for a poster, you know, I've also used it on a t-shirt design. But so in this case, you don't necessarily need an icon, so I can take you know, like my brand noun list, you know, like, hey, alley vipers, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna make a giant snake that's like biting the typography. It's just kind of fun. You know, it's just taking inspiration from something like this. I'm seeing this type locked up, and then like, oh, how would I do USA in a unique way? Because you've seen USA locked up in so many ways over the years, especially like around 4th of July. You look at like Dribble, and there's like how many designers are like trying to do a unique take on USA. And I was looking at the letter forms, like, oh, you could do all of those in a circular shape. And that said, if you overlapped them, you know, you could overlap and use the crossbar, the S to replicate the crossbar, the A, and like you just get a nice double setup there. And this one, actually, it's funny because I found this afterward, but I had seen something similar that I think was inspired by this, but it doesn't matter. You know, like in general, this inspired this. Obviously, this is I was looking for a slab serif font. It's for a bicycle company, but I wanted to feel modern and tech forward still. You know, a lot of slab serif stuff can feel like more a hardware store or like outdoor brand, you know, that kind of thing, but it doesn't necessarily feel tech forward until you go sans serif. So I was like, oh, how can I do a slab serif in a way that seems very modern? And so in this case, inspired by like the ligatures and the fact this is slab serif, obviously this is much smaller slabs. All the letters are extended, they're more boxy. But I try to, like with this one, you can see it goes, it's like condensed and extended and condensed and extended. There's like really wide A's and then really skinny L's. I tried to keep all these about the same width. I wanted to be just chunky. I wanted to be balanced. And then the key thing, the reason I wanted those slabs in the first place, if you look at the outside here, I'm using this because it's for a bike company, the chain ring here. All different, I know they're not called links, the links are on the chain itself, but anyways, what are the cogs maybe? I don't know, the cogs, it doesn't matter. Each of these has a nice balance, and if you come through, you're like, oh, it fits perfectly. You can almost see an implied circle that's completed by the serifs. So I'm using that typography to illustrate in a very subtle way that you might not notice, but it really feels like it belongs there and completes the shape. And then in this case, you know, type in a shape. This word club could just be in there, but because I'm overlapping and I'm creating this nice Venn diagram feeling, you know, having it extended and filling that space just gives it a little bit of a special factor, and it also becomes a reason to look right at the center of that mark. It pulls your eye in, and then you know, add some visual interest. So thoughts on color. And I've worked at a lot of places. I've worked with a lot of talented creative directors, and I've heard a lot of thoughts on color. One of them was from Luis Fitch. I worked with him at a Hispanic branding agency, and he's originally from Mexico. He went to school in California at a fantastic school, and he runs an agency called Uno out of the Twin Cities. And when I was working for him, and I was picking colors for a specific project, I had some blues in there, a lot of like cool, colder colors. And he's like, Allan, no, you're doing it all wrong. He's like, that's such an expected Minnesota design thing to do. He's like, it's cold here. You know, you pick these cool, icy cold colors. He's like, when you're picking colors, pick stuff that's warm and inviting and pulls your attention. He pulled out all these photo books of villages in Mexico, and they even had like cars and stuff like that with like these bright cyans and oranges and yellows and reds and bright magentas and just these punchy, screaming off the page colors. And he's like, pick colors like this, warm colors that are inviting. And even in school, I remember doing a painting and having one of the my painting teacher explain the differences in the shades of black. How yes, you can have black, or yes, you can have white, but if you have a reason, like a minimalist reason, that you're going just 100% black, because you could have a warm black that like brings you forward a little bit, or a cooler black that pushes you back. Same with white. You can have a nice warm white that's inviting, a creamier color that's just barely off white, but just like that little bit of warmth can add so much. And same with just cooling it off a little, it can give it a completely different feel. So here's the key one. Here's my key thought on color that I think is really valuable and helpful to hear. A funny thing, my dad worked for Federal Express for years. He started there as a courier back when Federal Express first started. He was a very early employee, and he worked there the whole time I was growing up. And so I saw the FedEx logo. I saw all the different iterations of it, you know, like over the years, when he had Federal Express to when it rebranded to FedEx, to when Landauer took it and they added that arrow in between the E and the X. And you know, even though he worked at FedEx and I saw that logo 1,000 times when I was a kid and I didn't know much about logos or anything like that, I don't think I ever noticed that arrow until I took a design class and some teacher pointed it out or something like that. I was like, oh, there's a negative space arrow. But I think that's really nice to have in a mark. I'm not saying that the arrow is irrelevant, because I think it's powerful. It's nice to have something in a mark that's an aha moment. And so I think it's really cool, the arrow and between the E and X here. But that's not what I want to point out specifically about color. When Landauer was doing it, so Federal Express had this like more of a creamy purple, they had like a carrot orange. And when Landauer rebranded them, the marketing director said, it was like basically the brief was this: when I see a FedEx truck 3 blocks away in downtown New York, I want to identify it as FedEx, and not just because it's the FedEx colors. Like, I want to be able to read it, I want to be able to see it. And so a lot of people called Federal Express FedEx anyhow, even like people outside of the business, you know, that weren't working in boardrooms and stuff like that. And so they're like, all right, let's make this shorter. If we get it down smaller, you know, the best logos are usually 2 to 6 characters, you know, because you can make them really big and chunky. The more characters you get in there, the more extended it gets, the more, you know, it just turns into a horizontal line you have to make gigantic just to make it legible. So making it FedEx, you can make that thing huge on the side of the truck. That helps. Obviously, you're going to see it from far away. The other thing they did is they took that purple and they took that orange and they just juiced them and made them as saturated as possible. It doesn't show that much in this photo. I think the photo has been, you know, like they juiced the contrast on it, so the purple looks almost black, and the EX looks like it's like fluorescent orange. But I tried to pick colors that were close to what they had based off going online down there at the bottom. So you can see it's a really bright orange and you have a really bright purple. And the joke I always tell clients, I'm like, pick I'm like, pick really bright colors from the start, because the reason they're picking those bright colors is so this stands out. It stands out on social media. It stands out in a sea of logos. It stands out like you're doing a sponsorship for anything, and you got the whole collection of all the sponsor logos at the bottom. Your logo is going to stand out and be punchier because it's brighter. You're always going to have competition against other marks and trying to stand out more. And the way you can stand out more is to, have thicker lines, brighter colors, just being more bold in all your choices in your design. And so, yeah, I always push for bright colors, really, really bright colors with branding. And then the other thing I always suggest is to make an archive of color combos that you like. It's easy to like in all my folders on my Instagram or Pinterest or stuff like that, especially on my Instagram, I have like I have a whole folder of eagles. Like when I see a sweet designed eagle, I save it. I have like this collection of like 50 amazing eagles that are just beautiful, right? And I have folders that are just like hands illustrated, because hands are hard to draw, and I love finding inspiration by people who draw hands beautifully. And so I learn a lot. I actually really, that's one of my favorite things to draw are hands and faces. I like because of the complexity of them. I always enjoy drawing them, like when I'm drawing with a pencil, but even illustrating and stuff like that, you're gonna make a lot of hands over the years as a designer. And so it's like, you archive those. But what I got here is archive color combos you love. I have a folder that's just like, whether I like a design or not, I save, like if I like the colors, I save it into this folder. And so I have some really beautiful color combos on there. Obviously, I tend to really like things when they have pink mixed with other tones. There's a lot of pink on this board. I love orange, it's my favorite color. And so there's lots of oranges. But even just like that top left one, that good food, good mood, that's just some italic sans serif type, but the fact that they threw some like really fun colors with it, they got primaries, they threw a grass green and some pinks in there on this, this intense black, it just makes it so bold and it just really sticks out. So building a brand system. Just, I just want to double check. Is it, because, okay, you guys are all muted. I just want to make sure that, because I haven't heard anything. I was like, I want to make sure like I wasn't shut down and you guys are paying attention. I wasn't talking to myself. Okay, good. All right, building a brand system. Oh, I gotta find my cursor here. Okay. So I have a few examples of brand systems that I've created over the years. Actually, these are all in the last couple of years. So the City of Shoreview one, I'm creating an icon. I'm creating a horizontal version that looks really good in mobile, or where you need to have a condensed space. Usually online, like you cannot take up a ton of room to have like a giant badge, but that on, like on packaging or on a mural or on a sign outside, it's nice to have that, like more information, to have some sort of badge lockup. Do I do a badge for every client? No, I do an icon for every client. And in most cases, I do a vertical and a horizontal. It's not every case. I actually just branded a company that named FM, and they haven't launched it quite yet, but it's the icon is the 2 letters. It's kind of like General Motors, GM, like you're just going to see the GM, right? And it's the same kind of thing where like that's going to work as an icon in a small space, as long as it's only 2 characters. But 99% of the time, I'm doing some sort of vertical lockup, some sort of horizontal lockup, and icon. And then where it makes sense, I'm doing badges as well. So I've got this for a city. It's important that they have like just the Shoreview version, but then also a city of version. Sometimes clients are like, hey, I have a tagline and or like other information that sometimes needs to be there, but doesn't always. And so I'm always making multiple iterations, but I'm always creating a nice brand system. And so they have a lot to work with. So they're not stuck with like, here's your logo and that's it, and then all of a sudden they have to make this work for everything. Same thing, here's my branding. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that makes it easy for me to work with. I've got horizontal, I've got a badge, I've got a couple of vertical ones, I've got this circular badge lockup. I'm showing it on in white and color just so you can see how it works in both of them. And then I have City Egan. This is the city I live in. I was blessed to be able to brand them, which was super exciting for me. And same thing, you got like a city of version in a badge lockup. They use this on all vehicles. So the vehicle shows up outside your house and it says Egan on it. It's not like Egan like lawn mowing company or whatever, landscaping. Because there are companies in different cities that have those types of names. And so like you have the city version, you have versions with different subheads underneath it, and you have icons and stuff like that. And so it's nice to have all those versions. It's valuable. So ready, go, boom. All right, so this is the part where we get to have some fun. We get to make some stuff. You guys can ask questions. You guys get to draw. And I thought, hey, step one. Oh, by the way, is it possible to make it so I can hear everybody? So if there's questions and stuff and we can talk through, at this phase, to unmute everybody else? Or are they all muted, like self-muted?
I mean, there's self-muted. Everyone's
Oh, okay.
open to it.
Got it. Okay, that's fine. No, that works. That works. Okay, I just want to be sure. Okay, I'm jumping back in. So step one, pick a company to brand. Obviously, like if you want to brand yourself or a client or something you have in mind, you can brand whatever the heck you want. But just in case, sometimes like when you're on the spot, it's hard to come up with some ideas. And so I was like, hey, I'll throw a couple things out there just to get you started. Idea one, brand name, Crafted, spelled with a K. What do? They brew apple cider. I like hard apple cider. I like that stuff. I can't have gluten, so it's a good one. I try to pick things like where it was easy to pick brand nouns for them. So like, for instance, like for apple cider, like you can quickly think like a brand nouns. Oh, it could be an apple. It could be an apple tree. It could be apple seeds, apple core, like cut open. It could be a barrel. It could be a bottle. It could be a mug. It could be a pint glass. It could be all sorts of things. So like, there's a lot to work with there. Because sometimes, like, especially with tech companies where they're like, it can be very abstract and difficult to come up with nouns. Or like a bank, they're like, well, trustworthy. And you're like, okay, how can I do trustworthy? That hasn't been done before. A shield, a key. It can be tricky, but like there's a lot that you can work with something like this. So I was like, okay, that's a good one. The second one I have is idea number two, brand name Spruce. What do? A fishing and adventure lodge. I thought that there's a lot of stuff there, like trees and pine needles and pine cones, all the different animals you might see outside. Like you could have like a squirrel, you could have an acorn, you could have a deer, you could have like tons of stuff, anything related to fishing, anything related to the adventure itself, fishing hooks or whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there to work with. So figure out what you can do, like write on your notebook, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And then step two, and I'll give you guys some time for each of these too. But that first one, obviously, you probably don't need a lot of time, I'd hope. Step two, make a brand noun list. And so person, place, or thing, brand noun, what can be distilled down to an icon. And if somebody wants to speak up, I could help like just brainstorm some brand nouns with you quick, just to kind of get you guys going. Anybody?
You give us an example of like.
It was just like, okay, like what company are you branding there?
With me, I'm working. It's not necessarily a company,
Yeah.
but a branding scheme for a get out and vote
Okay.
campaign.
Cool. All right. So get out and vote campaign. You could have a donkey, an elephant. You could have like a megaphone type thing, or like even like what are those ones that like a cheerleader has, where it's more of like that cone shape, like an old school megaphone. A ballot. One thing I always like to do, just kind of to see what's been done to, is I'll do like a Google image search and just say like voting icons, because there's tons of like just like stock icon sets that have been created before, and it might just get you started making your brand noun list, and that always helps a lot. What else? Yeah, a check mark. Anything patriotic, obviously, like banners, flags, stars, stripes, eagles. Eagles are always good. Um, yeah, so there's a lot to work with there.
So do you take all that and then you distilled it down to 15? Did you say 15?
Yeah. So first, right now, like this, I'll have that on the next page. So spend 5 minutes coming up with a brand noun list, and bug me if you want help brainstorm. I'll help anybody.
One question there.
Yes.
I'm creating a brand, a clothing brand inspired by a tropical island, a tropical beach paradise island.
Deep Paradise?
A beach paradise
Oh,
island.
Beach Paradise Island.
Tropical island, yeah.
Yes.
A tropical island.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's in the Caribbean. It's a clothing brand, but it is inspired by nature or you know, the environment of the of the country, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I for that, I would be tempted to just start doing some Google image searching, specifically, you know, like put in some of those keywords and just hit on the images and just kind of start looking stuff that comes up. Palm trees, coconuts, surfing. Oh man, there's so much cool vintage stuff from Hawaii. Like if you looked up like vintage Hawaii travel posters and stuff like that, you're gonna find all sorts of inspiration. Really cool stuff. I would look up like if you threw up like dribble and did a search for like surfing or like surf stuff, like kind of see like different waves and like things that they might be working with. Oh, good. Crabs are awesome. But like different like tropical fish would be interesting. That could have a really cool feel to it. A coconut drink. So yeah, hopefully that helps get you started with that.
Yeah, this helps. Thanks.
Yeah, no
I have
problem.
a question.
Absolutely.
So my brand will be something called KindleWorks, which is a consultancy. I've had that name forever.
Cool.
And I need an icon for it or a logo or whatever. But every time I start this process, it ends up in kind of cliches like idea, light bulb, eh.
Right.
So how do you stay away from those cliches?
I think don't be afraid of cliches at first, because when you're combining things together, I think it's like how do I put it? You're almost creating visual puns. Written puns are looked down upon. Visual puns are always people are always like, wow, it's like so cool. You're bringing these two things that don't belong together in a unique way. I think even though like a light bulb like is such like a cheesy cliche, I've seen light bulb logos that are awesome. Like where maybe like the filaments in the middle look like a pint glass or like whatever. I've seen all sorts of ones, or like maybe it's like the old school beautiful light bulbs that are like those tall skinny ones that have the long filaments, and like on the inside you need to have a lightning bolt in there or something. You know, there's a lot of ways to take something that might be cliche, but by combining two things together, it makes it new and fresh again. And then just like with light bulbs, there's light bulbs that feel like, hey, you know, I've seen that 1,000 times, but you know, just do some Google searches on different types of light bulbs, you know, because like those spiral ones are really interesting, have a cool look to them. The like those long vintage old-fashioned ones have a cool look to them. Other things, so a consultancy, you know, it's all about connecting and bringing things together, bringing people together. And so I think a lot of it, like when I'm doing, a lot of brands are about bringing people together and bringing ideas together, and this you know, this connection. And connection can be done in a lot of ways too, that aren't necessarily heavy, necessarily on like an icon, or you know, it's like a fish and a crab combined together into something new. You know, sometimes like especially when things are more abstract like this, I will include stuff on there sometimes that are like linked lines. That will be one of my things on my brand noun list. Overlapping shapes, like Venn diagramish type things. You know, like the idea of like the human being aspect is always like have a category of all the human things, like hands holding a hand, just like the idea of a hand is, you know, it makes a human. an eye, which can be creepy if done poorly. Like single eye is always, like especially like what is the the dollar bill? They have like the eye in the pyramid thing. That's super creepy. But but if done right, like an eye, like for like IBM, like that Paul Rand poster, how amazing is that? It's just so beautiful. So if you do it right, there's like a Ion Design, the AIGA stuff. There's a lot of really cool eye stuff that's been done before. But having some of those things in there, so when you're creating these things, you're not as tied down to subject matter. It can be about the shapes and the lines and like how they're coming together. Links, not necessarily a chain, because a chain, like could feel like prison or something. But the idea of multiple things linked together, like the Audi logo, it's like the 4 rings all linked together. That could tell a story. Like if it wasn't for Audi, that could tell a story about consultancy or like working, together as a team. Like all these things coming together, all linked together. Obviously, don't make the Audi logo exactly, but that's a very abstract logo, and I'm not against abstract logos in any way, shape, or form. But I start with the subject matter, and sometimes the subject matter can be more abstract like that. So like on my brand now list, I do include those types of things. Good
That's
question.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got a question, Alan, on the topic of abstractness and perhaps maybe complexity. That's the issue I run into in distilling things down to an icon. Specifically, I'm working on my own brand for a creative studio named Superwell. And
Superwell, like like a well as in like I'm doing well, or like a well like I'm getting water from a well. Sorry.
Well, both. So the
Okay,
word
cool.
itself being Superwell, and then actually using a well as imagery and kind of, I really like the concept there.
That's cool.
I have what I think of as some great ideas for some artwork, incorporating a well and whatnot, which is kind of a complex image.
It is.
And to distill that down, I'm curious to abandon, that, but also find something that would evoke that quality in a much more simple way. And so either way, I'm kind of fixed on the complex imagery associated with the brand, and then the actual, I have trouble. I guess my question is, when you run into more complex directions, then where might you go with the icon in relation to that?
Okay, here's what I'd do. I would take it, so like the well, rather than having that as a noun on the list, I would make that a category and really break it down to like, how can I say, like, what are the different ways that I can explore a well? The first thing I do is I would just do some searches and see like who's drawing a well the simplest possible way. And I would try and find as many simple examples. Number one, so I don't duplicate it. Number two, so I can learn, all design is standing on the shoulder of giants. It's always, like innovation happens when you take something and you find a way to make it better, to amplify it, like Dyson, who put the ball on the back of a vacuum to make it so you can pivot a vacuum around. That's a simple way to innovate something. He didn't create the vacuum, he just put a ball on it, right? And it makes it better. And so, and he wasn't like, well, somebody already made the vacuum, I can't ever touch the vacuum. It's not that. It was like how can you take some learnings from how people have cracked these things before, how people have solved them. And even if you've seen it before, sometimes a little bit of research does always help. That said, so like, let's jump into well. A well is a really complicated thing, and to try to do it simply is going to be, honestly, a well kind of like, because like the stones and the way a well looks, it's not something that's used anymore. So it could feel kind of old fashioned and not necessarily in the best way. I could see a well done in like, like that super old, how do I define the look? Almost like the illustrations on a dollar bill where they're almost like wood carved or something like that, and like really detailed cross hatching. You could go that route and try and make it feel very vintage and like full on illustration. But that said, like, let's break it down. A well, the purpose of a well is bringing water up. And you're already saying well, so you don't necessarily need to show a well. You don't need to say it. You could show a drop of water you know, combined with a letter or a drop of water combined with something else, and you have the word super well right there, and you're like, hey, I get it. Since you're dealing with a double meaning of something's well, like it's going well, and the water well, it would be kind of cool if you could somehow combine those two things together. This is really cheesy. Don't do this. Like if you had a smile face and a drop put together, that's dumb. But like if you could get the idea of like the two meanings of well combined together in one image, I think that would be a win-win. It'd be kind of cool. You don't have to do that. And then as far as the letter thing goes, some clients don't want it, but most of the time they're fine with exploring the initials for the company. I always, you know, I put on my brand noun list. So like whatever the initials are, you know, they can always be interesting to explore with. You know, combining that letter with other nouns on your list is a fun way to make something original too. So you have a droplet, a bucket. The different ways you could illustrate a bucket, you could probably do that in a very simple way. The idea of the top of the bucket is circular, you know, playing with a circle. If you look straight down on a bucket, the way the handle comes off the side and stuff like that, potentially, let's say you did like a badge lockup and it was in like a bucket shape and it looked like a bucket from overhead. And it was a really subtle thing, but you could see it. But then all the type fell in the middle. You know, that'd be it can be an interesting take on it. You could break it down to like the brickwork of the well. You know, like how can you take like that simple patterning and apply that in some way to another mark to make it look like it's made out of bricks. The rope from a well is a really cool symbol. What if you have a beautiful rope that wraps around your badge? That could be really interesting, kind of a cool take on it. So you just like explore all the elements. You like, it's made out of bricks. It has water in it. You're using a bucket to take it out. You know, all these different things. The crank itself, like, is that something you could look at and just make a list of like all the pieces and really figure it out if there's something there. And then also then, like, I mean, look at the creative side. If you're talking about your agency, you know, like creativity, you know, like what pencils or like that whole side of it. You know, different tools you use, different ways that you're being creative, the way you're working with clients. Same thing, like if you're combining, you know, people, like if it's about craftsmanship or using your hands, you know, like is that part of it? You know, integrating, you know, that kind of thing.
Thanks for all the ideas and for answering my question, Allan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a question if that's okay.
Sure.
Right now I'm working with like a food company that's just starting up. They're doing like really healthy but Southern American kind of food. They're trying to start really quickly, and so immediately they're like, you know, packaging burger boxes, you know, food boxes and stuff. Would you always try and keep them strict, like mark first and then expand from the mark always, or would you sometimes maybe come up with stylings in different ways other than just going straight from like the logo mark first?
What I like to do, and I'll explain it later on in this mark too, like is figure out we're going to make this brand noun list. You're going to create an icon, and then from that icon, here I'll even jump ahead just to show you. Let me jump into the background here. From that icon, so like here's my icon right here. We have a thick line weight. We have a thin interior line width, like the negative space is thinner, so you have that relationship. We're using a perfect circle. It comes to a point, but it's not a perfect point. I have slight rounded corners, so I have all that brand language, right? And then like when I'm making the outside of it, like if you look at this ring around it, you see how it has all those same elements, has the same negative space, the same width of the line. I have slight rounded corners. All, you know, those big curves are based off circles. And that goes down to everything else, whether you're like getting into the typography, you know, like all that applies, you know, like if you can, and it doesn't always work that way, but if you're looking for like a look and feel for a brand design, even if it's something pre-existing, I always look to the logo first, see if there's something there, see if you can crack the code of like this brand, what is the brand language, and usually like with Target, when I was working on that, it's these two rings, it's a dot and a ring, and it's very simple, everything's based on circles, and so a lot of the time the design and a lot of everything that we did would be based originally off circles. And so we'd go back to that over and over and over again because that was the logo. All right, let me get back to where we were. Spoiling it. I'm spoiling it all, guys. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. Let me know, just let me know if you guys are ready to move on or if you need more time. Does anybody need more time? Let's just ask that question. Raise your hand or let me know if you need a couple more minutes or I'll just start jumping in.
I was going to ask and see if you wouldn't mind helping me with a few more nouns that I may not be thinking of.
Absolutely.
So Road Dog Knife Co. is the name of this brand.
Cool.
And Road Dog is like a close friend, someone you'd like go to a concert with or like go traveling with, like your best bud.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea of it. I've got a few, but I'd love to hear kind of what you think, what sparks your imagination there.
That's cool. I'm one of my favorite designers that I hang out with. His name's Wes. He lives in Egan too, and has a design firm. He does all sorts of awesome like big sporting events and stuff like that. But his favorite thing to do on the side, like his passion is just like love in the world is designing and creating handmade knives. And he spends like a week on each one, and he has like $35,000 worth of equipment in his garage for making knives. And he
That's
loves
cool.
it. You know, like, yeah, he like walked me through the whole process, and so yeah.
So coincidentally, you'd be a good person to ask.
There's a lot of cool stuff with knives. So obviously a knife itself, the shapes of the blades, depending on what types they are, you know, if you're crossing them, putting them together, if it's unique shape, if it's something that's, you're taking the point of it, like his logo, I think it lands in like a nice simple shield, but the shield's very kind of like it pointed, almost like the way a knife comes down. So it's like, it's a subtle take off that. And what else? It's all the different machines, the buffers, the sanders, the idea of like sparks flying off. You're always wearing like gloves and hands on, like when you're creating a knife, you know, like especially like that, it's a very like a craftsman focused thing. They have like big goggles they wear when they're you know, grinding the heck out of all the all those doing all that work, getting into the details with like the materials that the handles are made out of and stuff like that. Like you can have like layers and all sorts of different things that can be done with that. The way it molds together, the things that holds the handle pieces on. There's like little you see it with like a steak knife or something like that, where they have like, I don't even know what it's called. It's like the little metal piece that goes through that holds that.
Almost like the rivets or something like that.
Yeah, they've got some fancy name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those, and they have those in like unique shapes and stuff like that. What kind of knives are they going to be? I mean, it could be, if it's a whole mix, there's folding knives, the idea of a Swiss Army knife with multiple things coming out of it. There's all that you could play off of. What are you going to use the knife for? Is it knives for hunting? Then you could get into like all different kinds of animals. It could be an elk, it could be antlers, it could be rabbits, pheasants, or you know, the whatever that, you know, that whole thing. Is it a knife for whittling? It could be, you could get into wood and wood grain and this and that and the other. If it's a knife for cooking, you get into all different like cooking specific things, you know, like the elements and imagery. So you could think of like the end use and then apply that for it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I would never have guessed to like think of, I mean, I guess it makes sense. Yeah, to think of like what the thing's going to be used for and then incorporate something like that in there. That's cool.
Yeah, and that's a good tip too. Like when you guys are working with a client and you're trying to come up with noun lists, because it doesn't take long. I mean, you guys are almost done with it. If not, half of you are probably done with it, and you've spent like 10 minutes on it so far. You know, you get your approved contract and you start on the thing. Make your noun list first. Make all your categories. Really try and figure it out, and spend, you know, an hour and a half. Make your noun list. Send to them, and like obviously talk them through it. Be like, hey, but say start with like, you know, I started this to get you going, to get your mind working, and to create some categories, because they're not gonna think of all that kind of stuff just off the top of their head. And if you have some categories started, you know, that might, and because the thing I always tell them, because it's the truth, they know their brand better than I'm ever going to know their brand. And so I can kind of guess at things, but if I can get them thinking the right way and they can see examples, that really helps them to have really good noun lists afterwards too. So. I can keep talking too if you want. How are you guys doing? Everybody feeling decently good about your lists? I got a thumbs up there.
Yes.
All right. I'm jumping forward. Stop me if you need more time. Okay. So now that you got this long list, and I mainly use this narrowing down for my clients because I usually don't put a lot of stuff on there that I think is ridiculous or that I don't want to work with. But I include this whole narrowing part because sometimes the clients put dumb stuff on there where you're like, that would make an awful logo. And then also on top of that, to edit out things like from your list that they think are awful or like that they don't want to see. And so it helps both ways. And so this is it's more usually handy with the client, but take a look down your list. Just look down there. Like, is there anything where you're like, somebody had said earlier, they were talking about light bulbs. And like, if you don't want to see a light bulb logo, don't make a light bulb logo. Keep it, keep it off the list. Just edit it out right now and just be done with it. And keep only good ones. I put 10 to 15 just to keep it open for yourself. And that's usually because, especially if I'm dealing with like 6 clients or something like that, like a room of like a boardroom or something like that. Sometimes I have I'm trying to pare down a list of like 80 things to 10 to 15. But if you're just doing something for yourself, for like, hey, I'm just going to design some t-shirts or something like that for on the side or whatever it's going to be, you can make a list of 5 things and kind of go from there. But I do think it's valuable. Like, it's easy to skip this step, especially when you're doing stuff for yourself. I think it's a really valuable way to get your brain to think about things that might be a little bit unexpected and to force yourself out of creating things that maybe you've seen before or just like expected things or like making the same things over and over and over again. It helps get you out of that. So does anybody want to volunteer to, like, does anybody have a really long list and they want me to like help them get rid of some stuff? I could be a client.
Yeah, I'll be willing to do that.
All right.
I've got, so my company name's Hemmed, like a hem, and it's a t-shirt brand. So I've got shirt, thread, needle, sewing, street, city, bike, walking, tree, house, roots, hanger, forge.
Did you say hanger?
Bridge.
Hanger or hanger?
Like, hanger, like a hanger the shirt would go on.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Start after that one.
Forge, key, bridge, bird's nest, alley, wilderness, and monument. And what the shirt company does is really focuses on making shirts specific to neighborhoods.
Cool. I didn't hear anything on there that sounded bad. The only thing I would say is what number, like, what's your overall quantity that you have on there?
I think I'm like at like 18 or 19.
Well, you could take a couple off there. You had one on there. You had like monument. That could be in general. It's minimizing it down. Like if you're trying to take like Statue of Liberty, and you could simplify it to like the torch or just her crown or something like that. Like you could. There's ways to distill that down and just like grab some elements from it. But if you're trying to like do a full-on monument, it could be really difficult. I think it's nice. What I would try and do is maybe like drop it into categories, and that might help because sometimes it's nice to combine things because like some expected with unexpected. You had some elements on there like about like city specific things, and you also had things on there that were about sewing, like sewing a hem, like a needle or a thread and things like that. And just to help you like when you start combining things together, it might be interesting to have those 2 categories to start creating juxtapositions between those 2 things rather than like what is like one was thread and one was needle, like, oh, I know what this is going to look like, but but like this is stupid, but like I'm just throwing out just like random stuff just to give you ideas, like you got Statue of Liberty, instead of holding a torch she's like she's holding a sewing needle, like, or like that's dumb, that's I can't believe I said out loud. But like we talked about the crown, you had like different like needles across it. But both those are really awful ideas. But in general, like the idea of like combining some of these things together could be it could be interesting. What were some of the other ones you said? Walking street.
Walking street, a bird's nest, because it's, I'm trying to get like the idea of it being your hometown, being something like, how can you kind of show that with a word?
Yeah, a bird's nest with like kind of like wound up thread, and they just had a needle.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be really interesting.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, there's some. I like animal stuff. You know who needs a good icon is the brand Nest, because they just have the type treatment, and they need an icon, man. Because how often do you get lucky enough where your brand actually is? You can make an icon of what it is, like Target, and they have a Target for a logo. Like, that's great. Apple, they have an Apple for a logo. Nest, and they don't have a Nest for a logo. It's like, come on, you guys. It's like you're all set up. You got the short name. You got. It's so easy. Just do it. Sorry.
No, awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a good list. I don't think you need to narrow anything specifically. Some of the more complex stuff you could always pull off there just to make it easier on yourself, but nothing on there sounded like too complex or anything like that.
I do like that idea of trying to take some of the words and that might come out to be a more complex object and thinking about how to simplify that specific word. That was great.
Yeah, cool. Is everybody feeling good about their narrowed down list before we move on?
Yes.
Yes. I can only see 4 of you, and you guys all nodded. So, because I like the shrunk down version. I suppose I could scroll. They all are. All right. So, icon sketches. So what I like to do, and you don't have to do this, but I think it's kind of nice, is so I have my brand noun list, and I don't show my client this or anything, but I'll do like, so this is some stuff I just did recently. I was on a fishing trip and I had a lot of time. We would have to take this motorboat to and like all the way up this long river, and it took like an hour and a half each way. And so I had this huge chunk of time where somebody else was driving the boat in the back, and the motor was too loud to talk. And so I just had like silence, and so I could throw on headphones, listen to like a podcast or something. But what I was really enjoying doing was I'd pull up this little field notes size sketchbook, and I just started like designing, because I've been really into designing different t-shirts and stuff like that, and different stuff for my site. So I'd made this noun list, but then I just to make it easy on myself, I started thinking about like each of my nouns, like how could it be distilled down to an icon in a simple way. And this is a great time to like go on Dribble and search like that first one, campfire, and like look for like campfire logos or illustrations. Go on, or Google Images and just like search campfire icon and look for them. And you can just kind of see how different people have done these things in simple ways to see what not to do. And then also like something to start with, because like somebody might have designed a campfire like this where it's like a tiny little flame with an X below it. But at the same time, if I'm combining that with like each of these is like a fish hook or something, whatever, like I do something different with it, all of a sudden it's I've innovated on it, it's different, it's not the same thing anymore, and I can illustrate it completely different too. But like just generally, like just to look at the way things are distilled down to the minimalism, it's always best to like, there's a lot of people who've done a lot of work, like how can you just gather and hunt and peck and learn from other people, basically use them as teachers to teach you so that you can make your product the best that you can make it. And then also just just making just a little icon for each of these, it helps to start creating those visual overlaps. Like even when I was just doing it right here, look, I had these pine trees, they're kind of triangular, and like arrowheads are kind of triangular, and I started thinking like, is there some way to combine those together? Or what else do I have on here? I have like fly lures and like fish hooks and bears. This is like the most awful bear sketch in history of bear sketches right here. Bear is something bad, but that's okay because it's for your own sketchbook. It doesn't matter. Just the idea is just like, sometimes seeing these rough icons next to each other helps you create that visual overlap in your mind to find those overlapping things. Hey, a pocket knife is kind of the same shape as a canoe. Smokey Bear's head is kind of circular. Maybe it also looks like a bobber. I mean, that's dumb, but you get the idea. Like I'm looking for visual overlap, and then that can help. So you can create little icons for each one if you want, if that helps you. You don't have to. I only do this sometimes, but sometimes it just helps me to make it a little smoother. I'm trying to give you guys tips. And then I go from there and I jump into icon sketches. Let's spend a little bit of time here and we can talk through some things. So these ones here, these are based off that noun list that I just had on the last page. And so I was doing these Northwoods themed t-shirts because I was like, hey, I'm experiencing this. I'm seeing it firsthand. I'm fishing. I'm on boats. I'm catching walleyes and northern pike and muskie and stuff like that. And then I'm seeing these different trees, these different pines and spruces, and like all these things up close. I'm looking in the water for different rocks, and I'm seeing like all the different elements and things that I could use for subject matter are all right in front of me, and I'm seeing them and touching them up close. So it was kind of nice. It's nice to do that because on like when I was fishing, or like I'd have to like, you know, like when you're sitting there and it's quiet and you just having the breeze blowing, you know, sometimes it's kind of nice to have a little game to play in your head. So like for me, it was just like kind of fun thinking about some of these things. So I was combining a circle with 3 fish, you know, like the fish can be created in a semicircle. And so I created this, you know, like the idea of them swimming in a circle in a shape. This one, it's Northwoods. I picked that name specifically because it's 5 characters of 5 characters. It'd be easy to balance out. Whenever I get to name something, I'm always not only looking for a good name, something ownable, alliteration, you know, all those things that like a good writer looks for, but also I always look at character count. You know, it's nice when you have a shorter name. It's nice if you have multiple words, if they're balanced in some way. Maybe you have a really short one and a really long one, and like I'm thinking about that, you know, that kind of stuff in advance. And it is nice, especially if you're branding something yourself or coming up with the naming. Like in this case with Northwoods, you know, the Northwoods series, I was like, oh, you know, 5 and 5, it's nice. It'll always balance out, and I can use that in interesting ways in badge lockups. But this one, I have this arrow pointing up, like to the north, you know, like an arrow, and where the bottom of the arrow, the feathering, is also a pine tree. I thought that one was kind of nice. The whole, like you in the past, like you've seen like snake eating a snake kind of thing, or a snake eating its own tail, and those types of things. That I thought, oh, that'd be kind of funny to do. Northern pike eating a northern pike. You know, that's just, I think people like fishermen would get a kick out of that. This one I was looking at a pine tree, and one of the ways you can illustrate it is with these half semicircles, which is the same way you can illustrate the ripples on water. And so I was like, oh, what if there's some sort of way of creating almost a diamond shape out of these, where I have the ripples coming down and the pine tree going up, and they balance each other perfectly. And it's still clearly a pine and water, but done in a unique way. A fish hook has a loop on the top of it, plus it has a little barb at the bottom. So I thought, hey, like, is there some way I can play with that? You know, whether it's an M, you know, because I'm from Minnesota, and so a lot of Minnesotans like to buy my stuff, or like an S for like South Dakota, or you know, anybody from that side, and little W for Wisconsin. I'm just thinking like, I'm thinking of like Northwoods states, right? And you know, creating a pine tree in the negative space of the W. You know, combining these things together, you know, the letters are usually like ripe for combinations with different things on your list. The idea of the shape of the geometric shapes of these 2 overlapping circles of a fish, but then using that to create the top of the pine tree that fits in there perfectly. And this one's not combining anything. It's just Northwoods in a circle. But I just happened to have it with them in the sketches. So before I get too far ahead, so when you're making sketches, can you do pencil sketches? Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the times when I'm presenting sketches, when I present to a client, I either take them and I do really rough sketches to begin with. Like these ones, that's about how rough they are. But would I present a client sketches like this? I'd probably take each of these, because some of these are really small. Like this fish hook one right here, this is probably 1/4 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch. And you can see how thick that pencil stroke is. You know, I'm really zooming in on, you can see the texture of the paper. But I would take all these, and if I was presenting to a client, and I'd probably redraw them all at about, I don't know, 4 inches by 4 inches, like really nice. I might use a compass and really like clean them up and make them look not perfect, but I'd spend a half an hour on each one and make them all look really good. And then sometimes when if I'm doing more geometric marks, especially for tech companies and then like things like that, or sometimes I just want to see how it's going to look in vector, like the final one, I'll just jump in and I'll just start making them, and I'll make every single version. Like I'd shown you those shore view ones. I presented them just all vector. Like I basically just designed 15 logos from scratch and presented them all to them. And like in school, they always tell you, they're like, go meet with your client, talk with them, come up with the brief, and then vanish for a couple months, and then come back and say, present 3 logos, no more, no less, maybe 2, but you might scare them. If you get more than like 3 or 4, you're gonna overwhelm them. Just present 3, that's it. And hopefully they like one of them. And a lot of agencies I worked at, they all did that same thing. Like, they'd narrow it down, and they'd only present, you might present, design a certain amount, but and not really include the client in the process. And I think that's the end of, not always, but like every so often, when I would try to do that, I would have angry client that just hated everything. And I don't want to do that, especially if I work my butt off on something. I want my clients to be super happy. I want them to see that and be like, yeah. I want them to be like having the hardest time deciding between the different icons. And that happens, like if they're involved in picking the subject matter and the noun list, that happens when you're presenting the icons to them, because it's subject matter that they're on board with. And then on top of that, I present 15 different icons. I do black and whites, and I don't present them all on one page like that. Usually my presentation will be like, here it is in black, here's it in white. I talk through that specific one. On the page, I put which brand nouns I'm using specifically, just so in case they're looking at it later on with somebody else, they can quickly just glance at it and be like, oh, it's a leaf in a tree, right? Or whatever the 2 things that I'm combining, so that the strategy is obvious and it's crystal clear, so that when they're sharing it with somebody else, it just makes it easy for them, because they're going to be, and or they might be sharing it up with their boss or something later on, or maybe they're sharing it with their kids or whatever, and or their wife, and they're gonna have a big influence on it, or their husband. So that said, what else can I tell you about this?
You said you only show black and white?
Depends. If they're like, hey, we got a color palette in mind, like they already know kind of what it's gonna be, then yeah, I'll design it in color for that. But if not, even though it is definitely more fun to design in color, I love designing logos in color, and sometimes I have pitched them that way in the past. I never had too many issues, but you can kill a concept if a client just hates the color blue, and you present like the best one, it's in blue, and you didn't know that, and you're just like, crap. Or purple or something, like some people just hate purple. I don't know. They can't help it. It's just subjective, and same with liking a logo. And so why kill it just because of a color? And a lot of times they can see through that or see past that, but sometimes they can't. And it's important that when you're presenting logos, you shouldn't have to talk that much about each one. It's kind of like a fashion model walking down a runway. They shouldn't have to stop and explain their outfit to you, because when these things are out in the wild, when you see that logo on the side of a building or side of a truck, it's not like all of a sudden, boom, and I'm gonna pop up and be like, well, here's the thinking behind it. Well, it's this combined with this, which talks about how the company was founded, blah, 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 blah. Like there's not gonna be a paragraph of copy next to it. It's just somebody's gonna see it and they're gonna like it or not, and they're gonna think it's a good representation of the brand or they're not, and it's subjective, and they're okay to have their opinion. And hopefully more people like it that don't like it. I usually lean toward presenting black and white, and I've had clients when I've presented in color. I've actually had clients where I just never would have expected, where they've asked, like, why aren't these in black and white? So if you do present in color, I would suggest, so like right now I present
I get the opposite right now. When I present in black and white, they're always like semi-disappointed that it's not in color.
Then do this. Do 2 slides for each logo. Do like, here it is in black, and then boom, here's the color one. Here's this in black, here's in color. And show it both ways. So they see the idea, they see the thinking behind it. They might be like, oh, I really like it. And then all of a sudden they see it in purple and they're like, wow, I didn't like it in purple. Maybe we should try a different color. That way they do get to see the color, because there is a wow factor to having a color, especially if it's something that they're like, I really like orange, because I really like
it's
orange.
Like a womp womp if it's not. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah.
Then try that. Try doing like a 2 for each. I think that works too. if I do present in color, I usually do that. I'll do both, or I'll do the color version, then I'll do a punched out, like a knocked out version, like what it's going to look like in white, and so that they're seeing it that way anyhow.
I have a question.
Yeah.
A lot of times I find, I don't know if anyone else struggles with this, but like I get really good ideas with like sketches and stuff, but then I'm like, I don't know if I can take this sketch that I've done and translate that to like the computer and Illustrator and make it like what I have in my head doesn't come across.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's just my ability not like as strong. But like, should I keep it like as super simple, or what would you suggest as far as like if you come up with all these sketches and you realize, oh, I don't know if I can actually create that, even though it's like a cool idea in my head, if that makes any sense.
So I'll answer that in two parts. One of the reasons I've presented a lot of vector logos lately is because sometimes sketches don't translate and sometimes they just don't work out, or like you start trying to make it geometric and it loses everything. And the worst thing you can do is, that's the worst. You sell a sketch to a client and you can't reproduce the same energy when you're trying to do the vector afterward. Another thing to think about too, for the second part of my answer would be, let's look at that bottom one, that one with the bottom left sketch on this page where you have the fish in a pine tree, right? So you might sketch it out this way, and yeah, it could be just like that, but you could try like, hey, what does it look like if the lines are twice as thick, 3 times as thick? What if the tail is connected at the bottom? What if it has, I added a lot more detail to the tail. What if the tail has like a triangular shape, like more vertical lines into it, is similar to the lines coming off the pine branches? What if those pine branches aren't perfectly straight? What if they're curved and arced, matching the shape of the fish? I'll start to I'll look at that sketch and I'll be like, okay, this is a starting point. I got my ideas here, and I'll just try and figure out like how to make it the best way possible. Then I'll try all sorts of different ways. It's more just like, hey, these two elements work together, and like, hey, the top part of the pine could finish off the top of a fish. That said, like the bottom of the fish, it's that triangular shape. That could, maybe the stem goes right through the fish, and that's even part of the pine needles working down, because that has the same triangle shape as the pines. There's a lot of different ways I could take that and vectorize it too. So like, try and think of like, it just don't look at it as be like at the sketch and be like, that's done, because there's usually, like 20, 30, pretty much infinite ways that you could, that I could take that sketch and make it vectorized. I think the trick is like, number one is key thing is like trying to keep it simple. Like you were saying, it's like, how do I simplify this? How do I get down to like basic geometry? Look at squares and circles and triangles, really simple geometric shapes. How do I use this few amount of elements as possible? Like that pine tree has as a 4-stack pine tree. It could be done in 3. Would it look better with 3? Probably. I mean, it would simplify it quite a bit. Trying to keep consistencies. Like if right now you have the arc of the fish coming down, but then you have that bottom triangle. If that bottom triangle is the same triangle as the pine needles, wouldn't it be nice if it was the exact same length lines that equal the same length lines that you had above? So just really kind of like solidifying things and finding overall visual overlap and balancing all the geometry within your shape as much as possible. Is that too complicated? Does that even make sense?
No, it makes sense. I think a lot of times when I'm sketching and stuff and trying to come up with ideas, I'm almost sort of defeated before I've even made it to the like design portion of it. It's like, oh, well, like I have this idea, but then can I actually execute that? And I work with different clients. I actually work for a museum, and so we do a lot of programs and things. And so I have to come up with like, to make each program seem different and fun, but stay within a certain brand. So it's kind of difficult to try to come up with like a look or like a logo. It's not really logos, but something that like brands the program. So Yeah, I just wondered how you got to a place where you sketch your stuff and then it sort of translates to what you were thinking on the computer.
Well, I think a part of that comes in, I think in that research phase, like on this last page, where I'm like, okay, I'm going in here and I'm trying to figure out, like I could illustrate a tent, like on the tent, really, really detailed, right? But I'm trying to think like, okay, how can I geometrically like really break down this tent? Okay, it's, like you'd have like the first one, it's like it is a perfect, right, or that's not a right triangle, that's a equilateral triangle. Equilateral triangle. You have this rhombus. I'm sorry, I'm not used to talking about shapes. Like, is that rhombus or is that what's that shape? Trapezoid? I don't know. Anyhow, and then I have a line underneath it. Do you need this line? No. There's a symbol like this, basically a triangle come up that has a line underneath it without the like these sticks sticking up. That's like the default like camping symbol that you see used by the U.S. Forestry Department. And so like, yeah, like how do you obviously wouldn't want to use that one as much, but like, hey, like you could put a door on here. You could not have these sticks on the top. You could simplify it more, but like the nice thing about this is just geometric shapes. They all fit really simply. So like you have some nice starting points. And when you're breaking things down, your icons to really simple, minimal shapes, like these, just like these, hey, I just took corner, like a box, turned it, 45 degrees, hit off one of the points, killed one of them, and I just have basically a half of an outlined box. Boom, 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 make 3 of them, then a line. It's super basic. Maybe this line is the same length as one of these. And so that just like keeps it as basic as possible. I'm trying to think, find these overlaps like, hey, well, is this triangle, maybe it's angled more like this and somehow there's overlap between the shape of the tent and a tree. The nice, when you're doing that, when you're breaking it down to geometric shapes and simplifying all your nouns as much as possible, number one, you're gonna find more visual overlap, and you're gonna end up with simpler sketches that are easier to produce as well. And when you look at like all the best logos that have been done over the years, here I got, I'm just gonna jump ahead to, I had a page in here. These aren't like the best logos that have ever been done. These are just like random ones I took photos of that, there's some of them are pretty great. That Bell logo that Saul Bass did up there. I like all these a lot, but I don't think like you'd be like, oh, that 9 logo, I remember that one. Like these are more like unsung heroes that I found in antique stores and stuff like that. But if you look at all these, look how simple they all are. Look at this eye. Like it's a circle, another circle, and then most of a circle that just curves off. And this is, there's just a few geometric elements. Look at this, like look how basic that is. Like that's simpler than that tent I have illustrated on the other page. Look at this, it's just like, it basically just, they took 4 squares, put them together, chopped them off at 45s, and then took the inside points and just rounded them slightly. You get this cool star diamond shape. It's really neat. You got the negative space, this P with the C, the way they link together. They round some corners but keep some sharp, so you get this really cool negative, funky negative space in there. All this, but like all these, it's just like so simple, just these geometric shapes, and that's why they're so good, and that's why they stand the test of time, is because they're not going to land in any specific style, because you're just like, you're going as minimal as possible. Like, and I think that like when you're picking colors too, like start with primaries or start with like something really simple and until you have a reason to make it more complicated. And when you're creating shapes, the same thing, you're doing illustrations, all of it, like start super simple, try and keep it as basic as possible. Like the Target logo, the reason why I like that mark so much is because it was so basic. It was a circle, a negative space, and then a ring around it, right? And the width of the negative space and the width of the ring combined were equal to the space of the circle minimal. The geometry was so simple that if I needed a Target logo, I didn't have to go dig up one of my files. I could just open up, I could do snap to grid, and I could make one in like 2 seconds because I knew all the geometry to it. It's just done. And a good logo should be that simple. It should be like you could draw it in 2 seconds. You should be able to, you should be able to be tiny as like a little favicon and be crystal clear. And the only way that's going to happen is if you're getting down to those like really simple geometric shapes. So it's really important, like simple. And really look at, again, like remember that Shoreview logo, like how they had the lines at the bottom of, and I smoothed them out and I straightened them out. really look at everything, not just the positive space, but really look at the negative space too. It's a big part of a logo. You know, just like this one, we were talking about this. Can you see my cursor if I do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of these sharing things, you can't see the cursor. But like just like the way it works through there is really nice. The negative space in here, you know, it creates this shape, you know, like that the eye. I think this is like neighborhood watch. This is like on everybody's window. And I don't know if that's across the country, but in Minnesota and Minneapolis, where I grew up, everybody had these neighborhood watch signs, and they're like on all the corners. I never thought anything. I was like, that's kind of weird. There's a bunch of eyes. And when I got more into design, I was like, that is really cool. I think it's so nice and simple and beautifully done. And somebody knew what the heck they were doing when they made that for the city. All right, so did that, hopefully some of that helps. I don't know. I mean, without sitting down with you and like walking through your process in person, I don't know if I can like narrow in quite as specifically, but
no, I think it helped. I basically, you're just kind of saying like, if you can keep it as simple as possible to like just keep simplifying it until it's maybe like a few shapes to kind of get your point across without overcomplicating, that probably makes for a better logo.
Absolutely. Should be more of a logo instead of an illustration. Like if you look at this set of 9 right here, you could really quick, like ignore the Northwoods one because that's not an icon. But if you look at the other 8 of them, which one would be a nightmare to illustrate and try and make it simplified as a logo?
Probably the fish eating the other fish.
Yeah, that one, I've looked at that, I'm like, I'll probably never make that. I'll probably never make that shirt. But if I did, it wouldn't be a logo, it'd be an illustration. It would be like something that I'd want to see like that big on a t-shirt. I would never try and shrink it down, because to try and break down the geometry and make it simple as possible, animals get too cutesy and stuff like that, and you wouldn't get the same feeling of like them eating each other in the same, or would be just way overly illustrated, you know, like the Cobra Kai logo or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of something that has a really detailed animal. Cobra Kai. But in general, like all the rest of these, like the geometry, it's like, hey, you know, you see this? You can make that illustrated in like a minute. You know, each of these, you're like, bam, 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 bam. They all, this one may take a second longer, but like, yeah, it's like, hey, there's a quarter of a circle, you know, like, and it's really, really basic. The most complex part would be like, how do I simplify it and do it as good as possible, and like overall, like figuring out what's the line weight going to be, you know, how do I do this needle so it looks good, you know, where it's not too thin, because needles are really thin, you know, but not too thick where it just stops looking like a needle. I mean, it stops looking like a hook. So things like that.
Cool. Well, thanks for answering my question.
Absolutely. What page was I think I was on this page. It's funny, like I have this sketch here, or these where they're all really similar. Marks I was doing for myself. I did a ton more, and I've done so much. The hardest thing is to brand yourself. I'm telling you, I've made so many logos for myself over the years, and I usually hate them after like 6 months. And I just over it. And this last one that I made, be up here, is the first one that I've made where I haven't stopped liking it. And thank goodness, because I got this neon sign. But it's simple enough that I'm like, okay, that's good. Like I could stick with that. It feels timeless. It feels ownable. Like I like it there. I've seen similar things before, but I've never seen anything quite like it, where it creates this perfect spiral. And then the negative space on it's like this idea of this journey where you're meeting an end goal, you know, like you're trying to, you know, like the idea of the craft and working through it, like all that stuff I read about at the beginning. I think it tells a good story, and there's a P in there, and it looks good, really simple on a hat. You can make it tiny. It does all the things it needs to do. But when I was making this, like I made so many different versions. And the cool thing, I always encourage, especially if for multiple reasons, if you're working on a mark for yourself and it's not for a client and you can share it out, take advantage of your social media following, like anybody that like Instagram and stuff like that. People love that. They like being included. They like giving their opinion. And honestly, especially when you're sharing out stuff, if you have a lot of designers that follow you, you're gonna get a lot better feedback from client or from designers than you're gonna get from like some like accounting client or something like that, you know. They all went to school for design, and they all know color, and they all know geometry, and yeah, you might get some dumb comments in there. You just ignore the troll comments, and sometimes you'll get some really good nuggets that make something so great and like just push it and make it that much further. And so like this is an example. This is actually like a post I had made where it's like, hey, I made a bunch of peas. I had this one where it has the arrow in it. I had this one where it kind of fits in like a cube type shape. This one where it's all the circles, and it's kind of similar to this, but it fits in a circle. And then this one where it has the point in the corner. And this one seemed like it was the simplest. And you know, like I'll even do like whether you're doing a poll or a vote or anything, or just like asking people's opinions or like how they think they could make it better. I've got like lots of interesting stuff, and I've had great designers reach out to me, like the guys at Wink. I remember this dude, there's a local agency called Wink here in Minneapolis that are like, I looked up to these guys for years. They're so good, right? And like they've had so much work at CA and stuff like that. Like I'd read the magazines, you know, when I was like a couple years out of school, and I'd be like, wow, these guys are so badass. And when I was working on this mark, he took this mark here, and he like did a bunch of stuff, and he was like, what about this stuff? And he'd spent like 6 hours just like playing with my logo, and I was like, that's so cool. Like it's like somebody I've looked up to for years. I didn't ask him to do it. I just kind of like reached out on Twitter, like this kind of thing, and I was like, hey, what do you guys think? You know, is any of this working? And a lot of the times with designers, man, they can't help it. They just they see a problem, they want to fix it. They want to solve it. They want to help out. It's intuitive. They do it all day long. How can they not want to? It's like it's what we were made to do. Any more questions? I'm going to kind of like start working through there, and we can always backtrack. Like if you're at an earlier stage in making your logo, don't stress it. I can always backtrack, and I can answer questions. I can move between slides. I just want to make sure we get through everything. I don't even know what time it is. I don't have a clock up on my thing. Let me just check. Okay, we've been spending some time, so I think we're at 1 hour and 45 or something like that. And we're close to the end of this, so I can kind of work through this a little bit quicker if you'd like, just to make sure everybody, especially if you have something going on, or depending on your time zone, if it's super late there, I don't want to keep you guys forever. And so I had this page that was going to pop up when you guys are working on your sketches, which I should have, instead of the last page, I should have had on this one the whole time. Just like for some, just like badge hunting inspiration stuff that I have found. That just like, I'll look at this stuff sometimes when I'm designing stuff, just to push me like to think more geometric, to break things down a little bit more minimally. These are ones that, like, you know, most of these logos were designed 50, 60, 70 years ago, and they still would look good. You know, like that bottom left one, if that was made right now and came out, you'd say that's awesome. That's like better than most logos that are being made right now. It's so perfect. It's so simple. It's ownable. It looks good. It has a lot of meaning to it. You know, it could be like a star. You know, it fits in a circle. That's another key thing. I didn't even bring that up. Obviously, you guys probably know this, but if you're thinking digital first, which you should, because that's where people are going to see your mark a lot of the time, is think, how is this going to look in a circle when I make this into an avatar on Twitter or Instagram or you know, whatever it is. You know, think that from the beginning. You know, like know that the end goal, this some point, this is going to have to be put in a circle. If I make it super horizontal or super vertical, it's going to be difficult to work with. You know, if it's a weird shape, you know, like how is it going to look when I put in a circle? Because yeah, I might not have designed it to be in a circle, but it's going to be stuck in a circle at some point. And so whether you like it or not, it's going to have to work that way. And that might be the way that most people see that logo over the years. So think about that. Like all these marks, if you look through all of them, every single one would, even though like some of them are rounded corner squares and stuff like that, and like this one's a little bit more horizontal, every single one of these is chunky enough, would work really good in a circle, would work really good at a small size. This A1 right here, these thin lines might get they're a little thin for me. And same with here, like these are a little thin in here. I probably would leave a little bit more negative space, but that's just like overall style. Like I like to try and always make sure that every logo that I have is going to work good. That 72 by 72 pixels. I should drink some water. I sound like a frog. But yeah, you know, obviously make sure it works good small, make sure it works good in a circle. So this is a badge building workshop, not an icon building workshop. So I'm going to keep moving. Obviously, the icon is very important, and I put a lot of time into my icons. So one of the things I talked about earlier, and I'll reiterate this just a little bit, narrow it to one, and then figure out the overall brand language that you're working with. One of the things we talked about is like in this one, I have this thicker outer line, I have a thinner inner line, I'm dealing with circles, I'm dealing with points, I'm dealing with squares, I have somewhat the subtle rounded corners, and I have this orange color. Those are the things I have to work with. Like I can make a list of like, here's all the rules, like how do I apply these to other shapes and other things that I'm building, right? And so extracting that, I'm able to apply that to when I'm creating a badge. If I've already created an icon to begin with, I always start, first and foremost, like, can I extract all the information I need from that icon and from those rules that I've already created to use it in the other places to create a nice system for multiple reasons. One is just overall consistency throughout the brand, so it all looks like it belongs together, so it all looks like it came from the same place, and it looks right. When it all balances and it's all on the same geometric grid and everything fits the same, it has the same balance, it just feels so much better. So I'm looking at this badge here, some other things. I love creating custom typography. I just want to show you this this example I have earlier in the deck. I'm going to jump all the way back to this Egan logo. So this Egan mark right here, if you look at these letters here, it's based off the font, the Hoffler font Gotham. But I did, like I rounded some corners, I changed some line widths. It's just like subtly curved in certain places. But one of the key things that I think is really important about this one is like, hey, I got this G, circular G right in the middle. And usually an E out of the can is a really skinny letter, and N is a wider letter. And so even though it's almost a perfectly balanced symmetrical mark, because the E was thinner and the N was wider, that G would be off center and it wouldn't align with the icon. And I think it's so key and so important, especially in a situation like this. Like, look at all those things. Like, I wanted this G to be dead center. And so I extended the E a little bit. I thinned up the N a little bit. I made sure I didn't squish anything. I made sure all my line weights stayed consistent. I basically redrew the letters so that they fit. I think your icon in the end, like it should look like a glyph that could fit within your font. Like it should all look like one piece. Like it all goes together. It came from the same artist, same thinking. What else? Typography. When even if you're taking letter, let's say like, because this is custom, I came up with here. I'm gonna jump past this. I created this custom font to match this icon for this. Don't worry about always, like, you're not going to create a custom font for everything you make. This is because I was doing it for myself and I was just nerding out and having a good time, and I was using all that brand language I had created in the icon and trying to apply it to entire font. So I have like the perfect circles, I have some rounded corner ones, I have some slightly rounded edges, I've got this inline shape, I have inlining happening here. I have a lot of the same things. I am drawing inspiration from that and then applying it. That said, when you're typing out that whatever your name is and you're picking that font, let's say it's a font, look at that, and a font is made to be viewed as like any combination, has to work functionally, right? But sometimes that doesn't always land perfectly. Like when the typographers are making their beautiful font sheets, specimen sheets, they're definitely keying out words that look really good in their font, like where the script letters land perfectly with each other, and like it just looks beautiful when it says the word bold or whatever the keywords that they're pulling out. And there's some words that you can type out, like when I'm working with script faces and let's say I'm taking the word the or something and I just want it in a script. I'm gonna look at that in a ton of different script faces because some of them just look bad, right? Like you put those letters together, they might not match. And then, so I think the key thing is once you type those out and you have those letters, say, okay, these are my letters I'm working with. Think about, okay, if these specific letters were designed from scratch, like if I'm redesigning them and I want them to fit perfectly together so they look like they were made to only be used in this pattern, whatever, like this Wits one right here. I knew I wanted to be fit specifically like that. How do I make it so that that word Wits around the middle could read as perfect as possible? You would probably want to make sure those slabs are the same width as the top of the T. You'd be looking at the negative space between the W and the I that's kind of gappy. Like, how do you make that work better? I think I might have pulled in the W a little bit or changed it a little bit to try and make it a little bit more vertical so I didn't end up with too much negative space. This is a couple of hard ones to work with. I mean, a T has big gaps underneath it. The W has a huge gap between the I and the W. If the I there was more extended, you'd have these huge negative space gaps between them. It would be really tricky to work with. So like I've done some subtle things in there to try and really get a balance of, like, when I see that space between the W and the I, and the space between the I and the T, and the space between the T and the S, like that negative space, I wanted it to feel balanced and to not only have the letters work together, but the negative space working together as well. And so like look at like little things. A lot of times the tweaks that you're making to the typography are so subtle, like most people wouldn't see them, but when you see like the before and after, usually it's like a no-brainer. Like you're like, wow, that looks so much better. Like when you see that Egan logo with the G off center versus in the middle, somebody might not notice at first, but if you had them side by side, they definitely point to the one with the G in the middle, and they'd be like, wow, that one looks way better. Why does that look so much better? And you'd be like, well, it's some subtle changes I made, but I just balanced the whole thing. I made sure those letters looked perfect together. Gosh, I sound like a nerd. Anyhow, so extracting the visual language. Right now I have this overall shape, like this badge shape. We're making badges, right? So I chose, I've done a couple different ones. I think I get into it here. I have all hexagons here, but like even this, like I was looking at the element arrangement, like, so I'd created, I was like, okay, I got these pieces. First, I started laying out the type. How can I make the type look the best? Are there any elements that need to be in there? Obviously, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the established date don't need to be in there. And honestly, design code doesn't need to be in there. But if you're going to make a badge, there's so many different things that you can put in there. You can put the established date. You can put ESTD. You can put EST. Put the date. You can put the location. You can do Roman numerals. You can do, especially if you're making it just for like a t-shirt or something like that, you can get really kitschy with it and like have some fun with a copywriter. When I did a lot of the marks that I made for those bike gangs posters, I worked with a copywriter at Target, and he was just having fun coming up with like random little slogans and like little balanced words. And I was telling him, like, it's really important that they're balanced, so like try and think of things where if it's 2 words, they have the same amount of characters in it. And he came up with such great stuff. And I was coming up with stuff. Even my dad comes up with some dumb ideas for me here and there. He cracks me up. He's a writer. He writes books, but his sense of humor it's like if you're talking dad humor, he's like the epitome of dad humor. And he takes over to the edge where it's like it's not even funny anymore. It's like it's for his own amusement to tell the jokes. Anyways, back to badge shapes. So yeah, start with the inside. Like try and figure out how you're going to piece those things together, and how you're going to balance them. Obviously, look to inspiration to different shapes. Like look at all these different shapes. Like going back and doing antiquing, badge hunting, and finding stuff, or going online and searching badge hunting, or going on Pinterest, looking for badge style logos, all that kind of stuff. There's so much great inspiration you can find for different shapes and different ways to lay stuff out. I mean, look at some of these in here. Look at this brewery here. So they're dealing with an icon. They have the circular shape, whatever your icon is, and then they have a script. They're locking up. They got the whole thing in this cool like flame type shape. I don't even know if that's what that's supposed to be, but it just looks awesome. I don't hate it at all. Same with this one, this Artesia water, I guess. Oh, it's from Pabst Milwaukee. I wonder if it has alcohol in it, because that's Pabst Blue Ribbon probably. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It has a nice icon at the top. Like they create this unique shape that fits around it. It's not just in a circle, because it's so easy to be like, hey, I made an icon, put it in a circle, put type around it, I made a badge. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you can do that, but You know, like, are there some, you know, like this one has the extra type in the middle plus icon within there, has this cool little saw blade thing. Like that's cool. I like saw blades. I mean, it's about tools. Somebody was talking about making, you know, a knife company, and like you have freaking knife blades coming out, whatever ends up being, you know, like some one of the tools that they're making the knives or grinding them down with. You know, there's so many cool shapes. And then also the shape itself, it's like kind of like that snake one. Like, look at your noun list. Are there some unique shapes that could be shape containers, or you could put stuff inside of it? Or jump back to you know, the Portland badge hunting one. Where is that one? This one, where you know, like I'm just starting with like for that one. I had a whole bunch of content, but I was like, I want to do something that's just like some unique, beautiful shapes put together. Like if you took all the type out of this and you just had that circle with those two overlapping shapes, creating that Venn diagram thing, like that's kind of a cool symbol. Like just on its own, it's just kind of pretty to look at, more just compositionally, you know. So you know, just creating something that's just like, hey, this has some beauty to it to begin with. Obviously, badge hunting, I was thinking of overlapping shapes. I was thinking about bringing people together, you know, finding things like overlapping. And that's what that was about. But I mean, it doesn't say anything specifically about that here. More than anything, it's just really pretty. And when you're creating, you know, creating these abstract shapes, you're creating all these shape containers. Like, hey, I got a place to put some type here, and some here, and some here, and some here. And if you're creating a fictitious brand, you can put all sorts of stuff in there. And even if you're creating a real brand, you can start putting things in there and like adding things like, you'd be surprised how many taglines I've written for brands just because I put them in because I was creating a badge for them, and they saw it and they're like, that's great, I love it, without spending any. It's like, do I get paid extra? I just wrote your tagline for you, you know. And like usually like an ad agency would be charging like 30 grand for that, and I just did it because it fit the space at the bottom of the badge nicely. So anyhow, but jumping back into shapes, this widths one was interesting when I was working on this guy, and he was saying that I think I presented, I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the, it was something like this. It might have been shape option one here. So the logo itself, it's a W, and it's a house. It's a realty company, so it creates this cute little house icon. It's also an arrow pointing up, like, hey, we're doing great, and you know, it's like positive. And so I took this vertical, this point here, and I was like, oh, you could take that same thing and create a shape around it. You know, I always have these elements here, and you could create basically this nice little burst. And he showed it to, he really liked it, and he was like, he showed it to his wife. She's like, yeah, it looks like a bottle cap. And he's like, yeah, it does look like a bottle cap. And he's like, hey, listen, I like it a lot, but it looks kind of like a bottle cap. Can we just put in a circle? And so I started laying it out, and I did a circle, and I'm like, nah, that looks fine, but it loses some, it's not as unique, you know, like, I'm like, I feel like I've seen something similar to this. And taking this element from the logo, I really liked that I was using the brand language. I was like, is there some way to do that in another way? So I tried, like, maybe if I use fewer of the points, and you know, it doesn't look like a bottle cap as much, or you know, this one probably looks a lot like a bottle cap. But even this, it's like I'm using those same types of shapes, but I'm creating a hexagon. And then when I did this one, I was like, well, I got this curve in here, and I was like, well, what if I wrap, you know, use the points, but then I wrap around the curve, and I still have the elements and the curve. And this is the one he loved. This is the one sold it. It was like, has the brand elements. It's simple, but it's so unique. Like, how often have you seen a logo that looks like this? It's kind of special, but it's really simple still, you know, and it's ownable. So I think that's, you know, a lot of times you can get your overall shape of your badge from the icon itself, you know, like just like digging in, figuring that brand language out. And so just because it's getting late, I'm gonna keep moving along. And you guys can always, like, if for some reason you're working on your logo, you have questions, you can always reach out to me. You can send me an email. You can reach out on Instagram, comment, or like message me or whatever. And you're like, hey, check this out, or like at me on a post that you're like, hey, what do you think of, you know, like, this is one of the things that's working on from your course. Like, I'm struggling with this part of it. You know, like, is there something that any advice or tips you can have to help me work through this part? You know, just reach out to me. I would be happy to talk you through that. So I had already done this slide. You know, exploring typography, you know, like I tried slab serif on this, I tried a sans serif, and then I'd land on this one, and I did the inline and the regular. We talked through that, so I won't sit and dwell on that. Here's language, you know, keeping things looking like they came from the same place. So you can see here, I was exploring, number one, I was like, what if I take this mark and crop into a circle? You know, because that's gonna look better, you know, when you have to put in a circle on social media and stuff like that. It's gonna be nice if it's in a circle. That's gonna make it easier to work with. So I tried both those, and then I also tried with the point at 2 different widths. Each of these were at the negative space and the positive space, negative space, positive space. They're completely equal. Both these where I have the thin to thick and then thin to thick. And one of the things you'll notice is I switched the weight of the overall typography as well. I'm keeping it the same stroke, you know, the same stroke. And, you know, the negative space, so like if you look at the E here, it's the same negative space. You look at here and you look at the E here, it's same negative space. I'm keeping all the same geometry so that they look like they're balanced and they match together. And I could suggest that, like when you work on your marks, look at that, like how does it look when you see it all together? Like, is it balanced? Are you breaking the brand language because of the scale? Do you need to adjust the overall weight of your font to make it match the icon and create more consistency? And then, you know, sometimes if it's close but not the same, that looks, you know, it's just like clashing clothes. You know, like if you have 2 colors that look too much the same, it clashes. But if they're different enough and you create a contrast, that's fine. If they're the same, that's fine. It's just when they're like close, it's like 2 lines almost touching but not touching. It creates this like visual turbulence. And it's the same thing with, you know, creating these marks and trying to keep them balanced and consistent. You know, like look at line weights, you know, try and either have it all consistent or else all high contrast between the 2 things. You know, like you could potentially pair like this top one here with a serif face that looked completely different as long as it like maybe had some key things like, hey, it shared some circles and a few unique things, but because of the high contrast, they might actually pair really well because they're so different. I don't use a lot of serif faces, but I'm not against them, and I have used them here and there. So I have this 6.7, picking colors. I just have a few examples. I talked about picking colors earlier, but just like for here, you know, like he had asked me to give him some color options. He specifically was looking for a certain like kind of MCM, like mid-century modern kind of throwback, like 60s type of vibe, 60s, 70s in there. And so I was pushing some warmer colors, but then also some blues and some like nice mints and stuff like that. But you see how like my blacks aren't black? I'm like, this is a warmer black. It mixes really well with this warmer blue, you know, like a warmer blue is a mint or like a Tiffany box blue, you know, I've heard it called that. But then like kind of more of like a chocolate brown where it's almost black, but like it's not exactly black. Same with this one, like this is more of like a dark, like midnight blue that I'm mixing with is the one that like something a little bit cooler than what I'm using here. And so like a lot of the stuff I talked about earlier, you can see it in application. And then the last part is building your brand system. You know, like once you have, let's say like with your badge, you know, like it's nice to have that badge, that whole lockup, but it is so nice, especially if you're trying to use this thing functionally and you're going to try and like, hey, I want to create like you guys are talking about like a clothing brand, you know, like you're going to want to make a mobile site, sell the clothing, you know what, you're going to want to have, you know, potentially, you know, like you're going to have it on social media and all these different places. So you're going to need an icon. You're going to need a horizontal, you know, you're going to need your badge version. But the nice thing is if you create your badge this way, the way I was talking about it, it's really easy to be like, okay, so I have this. It's easy to pull these elements out and be like, okay, this works well with this. And I can pare them down and get the perfect balance, you know, like I had earlier, and a perfect balance here. And you can see how it just really works as a system. It's easy to put together. Once you have this complicated, big beast, this badge done, everything else just falls into place. It makes it much easier to work with. Obviously, think of ways to keep it simple. Here I have a left and right consistency, so I can make that icon nice and big and bold and simple. You know, this one I'm going left justified. I'm keeping that left stroke because they have this vertical line here, and I'm taking advantage of that for another vertical lockup using design code, because if you center it underneath here, it stops looking as modern. So like it's simplified. Like this reminds me of like old Saul Bass work, like stuff that's like stood forever, like it just always looked solid, you know. So I like have that version if I'm doing something that looks ultra modern. let's say I'm doing something that might have a little bit more of a classic feel to it, I might drop in some of like more of like a badge style logo with it, you know, something like that, you know, so I can kind of swing both ways. This was even more throwback, I'd say, and then this is like this one and this one are like the most modern for like a minimalist poster or something like that. I throw up this one, the steps. Make sure you save every version. I mean, you guys, if you've been coming to a lot of these, I got this Ms. Erin Draplin. You've probably read that, but I mean, who doesn't? Like, I always do this. I make so many versions. I fill hard drives with files, and I make just like iteration after iteration, and I save them all. And I always save versions, especially because I've been doing this for years. And early on, you'd have stuff corrupt or crash, and you'd like, if you didn't have like 20 versions of it, you'd be going way back, or your like zip disk would become corrupt, and you'd be like, damn it, and you'd be like back at square one. And hopefully you had a printout that you could go off when you're trying to like basically catch back up to where you were. So I'm used to making like version after version after version. But that said, like, you know, like when I'm making versions, I might go back, or I might hit it right away before I have to make multiple versions to get to something I'm happy with. But you can see here, like over here, I'm playing with the badge shape. You know, like I started with a straight line across, and then I ended up with this overlapping piece. I'm playing with all the inside content. Up here, I'm playing with different fonts here. I'm playing with weights. You can see the weights here. You know, like what's thin to thick, like what looks the best, what balances the best. This one, I'm like, hey, what if I made this into an eye shape? You know, it's kind of interesting. You know, playing with numbers, like how do numbers work as a system? I'm playing with like, you know, like this, hey, you can do it like a paper clip, like if I was doing posters or art, you know, like, and I'm just like start playing with the mark, like, is it fun to work with? You know, if I start throwing in color, how does this orange work with a color palette? I have some like pinks and some mints and some chocolate browns and a cream background. You know, it's not 100% white. You know, I'm going a little bit of not gray either. Like now it's a little bit warmed up to match the like this bright saturated orange. You know. Yeah, and so like there's a full mix, you know, like I have all this like posters and all these different things. I'm looking at like, hey, would this work with a gradient? No, it looks like garbage. I hate that, you know, but you gotta try it. Yeah, look down here, like a PDCO version, you know, that's kind of fun. And then I had this to throw up at the end. I was like, hey, here's all the badges I'd shown earlier, where I had like type lockups, badge shapes, different type inspiration, and then type as shape. And I thought like, hey, if we get to the end of this and there's like work time and I have a bunch of leftover time, I'll just throw up this one, and then I can start answering questions, which we can do for a minute, but it is 8:10. So like for some reason somebody has to drop off or anything, just know yeah, you can do that. Don't think twice about it, but I'm happy to, if you guys want to ask any questions or talk about stuff you're working on, let's do it.
I'll start off with, can you make these slides available to me so I can get it to the rest of them?
Yeah, I absolutely can.
Okay.
You mean afterwards, after the, or
yeah,
like
afterwards,
right now?
afterwards. Yeah. No,
Okay.
afterwards.
I have a question. So in all of this, I have an inconveniently long consulting name, Kindle Works.
Yes.
Can I split it in two? Is that illegal?
Well, you mean like legally, like actually legally, like
No, like graphically legal.
Oh yeah, of course you can. Yeah, you see it a lot of times. I've seen it. I remember there's this really cool. I think it was. What was it? I'm trying to think of the name. There was a mark. This April Mueller had done it a long time ago, and I remember it was a 9-letter word, and she had done. I can't remember. It wasn't like Patagonia. It was I think it was a Chinese restaurant or something. I can't remember. But anyways, she took the 9 letters and because it was 3 syllables, she did, you know, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and fit in a perfect square and spaced them all evenly vertically like apart. And so it's just like this perfect grid, this 3x3 grid, and it looked so good. And then she put in like, I can't remember if she just put in a square, and it was just like just simple and easy to work with. But because she didn't overcomplicate it or anything like that, It was just, I always love that stuff. So yeah, of course you can break it up. You can do it how you want to do it, because that is really long, and that can be really, having a really long word is always a difficult thing. I've had a lot of clients, like that threshold logo I did for Target. That thing, that's a beast. There's a lot of characters in that. And sometimes with that, it helps when you can add more stuff to it, whether it's taglines or established dates or where it's from, just start stacking above and below it to, like I added that, what is it, design and, I don't remember what the two, I don't remember what it says. Like I wrote that tagline for threshold and then it just ended up being part of the logo because I was like, I need something to weight it down here to balance off the icon above it because it's so long. It's a nightmare to work with, and just adding that helped balance it off. So yeah, that's a situation where I wrote the tagline and it just stuck.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I needed permission to break them.
You have permission. Especially with your own thing. Of course you do. As long as somebody sees it and they understand what it says, obviously you're gonna have, if you break it up, there's gonna be a person here too that is gonna say like, well, they're not gonna understand it, or they're, it might take them a sec to get it. But it like any mark, like if you see the Nike swoosh, right, and you'd never seen it before and you just saw it on its own, you wouldn't know what it meant. But the moment somebody says, oh, that's Nike, and then forever on, every time you see the icon, you're like, oh, it's Nike. And same thing, it's like you say, oh, here's my business card, and they already know the name of your company, and you hand it to them, they look at that, or like they go to the website, and yeah, that's the logo in the corner, but it says it across the top. Or they go on the Twitter, and yeah, they have this super like this broken up version of it in the icon, but it says the name of it right above. Usually the whole name is written out somewhere in context to it. So
I don't
it's
even
going to be
think it
legible.
matters because it's meant to be like Werks, like German, like a machinery, like idea works. And so I think if you break it up, that idea might actually be more emphasized. So okay, thank you.
I give you permission. Not that I have the right to do that, but I'll give you that permission. Any other questions or things I can help with?
I'm pretty new to doing typography and building custom typography. So I know that when you're building it, obviously you keep referring back to the icon to use certain shapes and stuff. But do you ever go back to the sketch pad when you're doing typography, or is it just at that point, is it like I'm in Illustrator now, that's how I'm building it?
Yeah. So when creating a type, in school, like the way they taught us typography is they're like, okay, take an existing font, and they're like gave us like a specific, they're like, here's some good fonts because you're just gonna pick some garbage font if I don't give you that. Here's like some ones you're allowed to use because you're dealing with like I was dealing with like like we were all type 1 students and stuff like that. And we're just learning this from scratch, and they'd be like, don't go crazy with it. Change one element, like remove all the serifs, see what it looks like, or like maybe you're gonna make a condensed version, or like change the negative space, or like you're gonna do one change and you're gonna apply it to the whole thing. Like don't try and overdo it, like because if it's a good font, it was usually designed by somebody who knew what the heck they were doing there really well. That said, look at this, this slide I have up right now, and you look at that Grand Central typography where they have all those ligatures in there. The G here, I'll put my cursor up there so you guys can see. It's the top right one. Right. You have the G, the R to the A, and it even next into the D, and then like that looks like, especially from the time that came out, that person was sitting there with grid paper, and they had a compass, and they laid that whole thing out to, it's all geometric shapes. It's all based off circles. They said this is my negative space thinness and my positive space, my stroke width, and I'm going to try and do this in like, I'm going to try and link as many letters as possible. They kind of like came up with their rule set and then executed on it. Obviously something like that Grand Central is not as legible as like jet oil here, because these are all separate, or especially Kenmore, that's like really crystal clear, right? And the moment you start locking those up, but that said, the more you start pushing your typography and taking it to like fancifying it and like trying to make it more clever, make sure it's like it's still really legible, like because like this tram one, you're like, I get the idea, like, hey, it's coaxial cable and there's wires running, you know, like it looks like a wire running along and the negative space is like the wire on the inside of the coaxial cable. Like, I get it, but at the same time, like, there's like extra lines in here that seem kind of funky, or like the fact this A could just go up and down. It doesn't have to go back in here. There's some weird things, like, see how this just like curves through here? The A could just come up and then the R could, I'm not sure how I do the R, but there's a better way to do it than how they did it here. That would make it more legible, and
Right.
would simplify it a little bit. You know, just it's tricky. It's like you want to make sure that's really functional. The other thing to look at when you're doing typography is like stick to the rules. Like go up, figure out a rule set and stay consistent. You know, like don't get crazy with like trying to make it like how do I put it? I did a portfolio one-on-one a bunch of times where like you'd go in and you'd review student portfolios and get to see them from all the different schools. And there would be some schools where like they're definitely like in Minnesota, like there would be like the top schools where, you know, like they bring their portfolio and they might have some custom type or a font in there that they design, and it would be tastefully done. You'd be like, okay, that's good. And then you'd have the schools where like the type teacher is just like they didn't really understand designing type that well, and then they're just like, make something cool and crazy. The crazier the better. Like that's like what I imagine they were telling the students, because the stuff I was seeing out of their portfolios was just like you wouldn't want to use it. Number one, it didn't look great. It was like just like a mess. It was hard to read. Our design, our function as designers, first and foremost, is communication. If we're not communicating a message, we're not doing our job. So it needs to communicate first and foremost. It needs to be crystal clear. And then, you know, like then there's all the other elements, you know, like how do you simplify? How do you add personality? How do you make it something somebody wants to see or wants to read? How do you get it exciting?
Right.
So there's all that stuff too, but like start with clear communication.
Right. I think for good practice, I'm just gonna start editing pre-made, like really well done fonts, and just see if I could like change the weights and stuff like that. 'Cause I think that could probably good practice and stuff. But yeah, that's great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, go on like a site like Brand New. I'm sure you've been to that site before. It has like the before and after, and like the comments are just trolls, like just murdering people. So like, I hate this logo. Or don't spend time reading that stuff. Go there and just scan through and look at the typography. These are people that they're getting paid a lot. They're at like the top agencies, and they're like God brought in because they're like, you're a top person, you're a top designer, and you're gonna be the one designing the Netflix logo, and you're up against 10 other designers, and this is the one that won, and you're seeing somebody who would just like nailed it, and they just they know their craft well. So go through all those. These are like $1 million rebrands that people spend so much time on, and study them. Learn from how they did it. I'm not saying to go there and rip it off, just but look at the subtle, like they make things custom, but it's subtle changes, and it's just nice tasteful ways that they'll customize the typography to make it unique, and usually it matches that icon really nicely. There's a lot you can learn from the best, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants, like I was saying earlier. It's valuable.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
What was the name of that? Brand New? Did you say?
Yeah, it's BRANDNEW. If you just Google that, I think it's under it's underneath the umbrella. Armin Vitt, he runs that. There's a Brand New conference. I think it's in New York and maybe another place now too that they run. But usually he writes up any major rebrands. Basically, it's a blog. This is pretty much mostly his full-time job, and he writes about. He'll write a review, and if you get a good review on Brand New and the comments aren't scathing, you did something amazing, because it's even the good stuff gets burned pretty good on there. You know, there's they'll fight them like, this reminded me of something I've seen before. That's always the comments are brutal on there, but just the stuff that is chosen to go on there. You know, it's like the Airbnb rebrands. It's all the big rebrands that are happening, the ones that are worth checking out, that are noteworthy. So
okay, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi. So
Joey.
as somebody who's worked on projects for cities like yourself, I think you'd be a great person to answer this question, because
Yeah.
I am working on right now an organization. I don't know if it's the right word, but it's run by the city, facilitated by the city. It's for Wilmer, Minnesota, and it's called
Nice.
Vision 2040. I live right by there, so we're kind of neighbors. So hi. But they're all about facilitating sustainability and inclusivity. They have an about page with tons of words and concepts about like basically future proofing the city, eco-friendly, justice driven. And I'm trying to find ways to condense all of those ideas. Like I have the noun list, I've narrowed it down, but I still feel like it's called Vision 2040. So my mind goes to like the I, like I keep thinking of CBS, the CBS logo. I've got lots of drawings with hands coming together. I've got classic Minnesota things, like I think of the trees and the water, like you were talking about before. But my question is, when you have so many things that you feel like are essential to understanding what the thing is about, how can you, it's like part of me wants to include all of them, but then you can't because you've got something too complicated and it's become an illustration and it's not scalable. That's also a problem. So how do you like eliminate, how do you choose what you can eliminate while also keeping the message that's dependent on so many different concepts? I guess that's my question.
One idea, well, you can, I've seen really complicated logos that have done well, like Unilever. I don't know if you ever seen that logo. It's just tons of like little icons all making up a U, or even like the Bahamas logo that Duffy did, where it's like all these different shapes. It looks like the islands themselves, but they're done in like really unique, beautiful ways that are more complex. There is that, you know, like you could like try and put everything in the kitchen sink in the mark. Like you said, it's going to have scalability issues. Like something that Unilever one that has, if I'm trying to remember what the most modern version of it is. I could be wrong. I think it's the mark that I'm thinking of. It has like a rainbow of colors in it. So, you know, when you knock it down to one color, it's still working. So there are issues that could come up in that. It'd be nice to distill it down to like, you know, like how do I say this in a really simple way? Is there something through the typography, like, you know, just the letters, and or if it's about growth, you know, like, is there like, could you simplify it down to like a leaf or something growing? That kind of idea, and just like really breaking it down to something that summarizes all the elements at once, you know, like, because you said it's about justice and it's about growth and it's about where they're going to be in 20 years from now, you know, like what's the future plan? Remember we did that.
The first one they had was called Vision 2020. It started in the year 2000, so now they've done a refresh.
Cool. I don't think that's the worst idea, you know, like, because that talks about the vision. It's about like, you know, future facing, and it's less about the specific bullet points, because the last thing even though like there is like some solutions like that Unilever one where you're like, hey, that does cover it, you know, it does all those things and is kind of interesting. It is pretty complicated, and there are some issues with it. So like if you can break it down and try and get away from like the like every client's like, okay, here's my bullet list. I want to cover all 14 of these things on my logo, and that never works out right. Especially if they're like, it doesn't future-proof a logo either. Like, let's say like, hey, I'm branding a company that makes cars, and I design a logo for them that looks like a car, and then all of a sudden they branch off and they're like, hey, we're also making air conditioners now too. And you're like, well, do you need a new logo for that? Like, well, we don't want to, but like at the same time, it looks weird having a car logo on our air conditioner. So like, it'd be nice if it wasn't so hyper specific to the function of the company, like in terms of like what they make, or a bullet point of like their service, and more about like in this case, obviously it's not a company, but about like, what is this value added, you know, like what is this thing you're doing? You're like future proofing, you're growing, you're evolving, you're you know, like a vision, seeing forward, a telescope, binoculars, you know, like you could start thinking about like all those things, but having those types of things as categories, and then imagine them as hallways with a bunch of doors on them, like, you know, like make your list underneath each of those categories. Like, could you really break those down? The idea of like of vision, or seeing clearer, or seeing further, finding scope. Or like the idea of growth or evolution, or like, you know, like whether it's about the people, it's about like a hand or people coming together. There's been a lot of, you know, like there's a lot of things you could do with a person themselves. Because it is the idea of justice, and the idea of like all the advancements in this of the city are all based around the people who live there. You know, like everything, it's like creating a chair that's really functional and feels great. You know, like, so they're trying to create this, you know, great environment to live in. So
Yeah,
if it could be about the people. I don't know. To kind of get you going on like your non-list a little bit.
totally. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Joey.
Hey, Alan, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, well, first, thank you for the workshop. This has been great. I've learned a lot, and especially just different ways of thinking, just things that I never really considered. So it's been really cool. One thing I was just wondering, because we touched up on like typography, iconography, shape and color, and maybe something that everyone can relate to, but I kind of wanted to get your take.
Yeah.
Is there a part of the process, the design process, that is your favorite in doing this, or that you like to dive into, or that you find yourself spending a lot of time in, that maybe you feel kind of contributes to your style? Because I mean, you kind of do have a style that's really kind of unique to how you kind of execute your designs, but I was just wondering if there's anything about those parts of the process that you feel probably plays into that.
My favorite part of the creative process is like that excitement you get when you just crack, like you have the problem to solve, and like the moment you like, just like that moment, the impact when you're like, you just like, you know, you got it, you know, you solved it. Like, yeah, that it can be like the roughest, stupidest sketch, but you like, you know, the idea, like you're like, I'm gonna be able to execute this and it's gonna be amazing. Like, like like some of the stuff, like those big campaigns I did for Target. I remember like they would start with like a simple sketch, and I would be working, and finally you just get it, and like that's the best feeling. And yes, I still do like the process. I like designing. I like every part of identity design. The things that it's more like, I absolutely love what I do for a living, and I get excited about it. The things that would drag me down a little bit, that I would just kind of get bored with, you know, when I work at big agencies, or when I worked, because I've worked at marketing firms, advertising agencies, I worked at small design shops, I worked at in-house at Target. I worked at basically every type of designish type thing that you can work at. and the things I didn't love as much is when I would be stepping away from what I'm best at. So like, I enjoyed making like broadcast, like television commercials and stuff like that, but I'd have to give away so much of the creativity to other people, where I might come up with the general like idea at the beginning, the general sketches, but then you'd have somebody else come in and do like the beautiful sketches that you'd sell, and then you'd sell those through, and then the copywriter would be like, you know, they'd be writing. I love collaborating, but like then they'd be working with it, and then you'd hire a director, and then they'd put their input on it, their spin, and then you'd go to like you know, like you'd go to the shoot, and they specifically had people there, and they have like at every broadcast shoot, they have a little place called like I forgot what they call it. They have some stupid name for it. They basically have like a tent set up for like the people that are like from the agency, and they try and like shove them away and feed them food and like keep them distracted, so that the director is not interrupted by them, and they can just make the commercial without ad people getting in the way. And it just drove me crazy. I'm like, man, like I want to make this. I want to make the damn commercial. Like that's like the whole like when I design a logo or design a poster or design an illustration, I'm making that thing. I'm in it the whole way through. I got my hands dirty. If it ends up stupid, it's because I screwed up. You know, I have every little bit of control over it. And I'm not saying like, hey, I'm like a total control freak, because I'm not with most stuff in my life. But when it comes to design and making things, I just like doing it. I want to do all of it. I want to do all the pieces all the way through. I like having a really good process. I feel like at Target, I'd work with big groups of people and teams and stuff like that. But as long as I was kind of like directing and I was involved and I was kind of moving all the pieces and I was controlling the whole thing, and like I'd make sure that like when it was put out there and it was a final thing, that it was great. I enjoyed that. And then the other thing I never really loved that much was when you get into like round 12 of retouching, of like trying to get the colors perfect, like, oh, I want this red a shade lighter, and you know, like there's this little hair on the side of the face, let's retouch that out of there. And you're like marking up constant, like, oh my goodness, it's just like, it's fine. Like I get like why you do that stuff and why you get down to the details. And I don't like skip over the craft of that. You know, like I understand, like I want a really good end product. But that said, like I do get more excited in like when I'm in like the machine, you know, and I'm working and I'm cranking it, like whether I'm working with a copywriter, whether I'm working on, you know, like any part of it, like I love the making aspect of it. So yeah, like the sketches I really love. And for different reasons, I like the sometimes the end process, like, you know, like like taking something and taking it through and doing all the whole digital stage, you know, like I love a lot of that too. I don't think any designer likes to do that stage where you have to make all the different 45 versions of the logo and name all the different files, and like, here's the black version of the logo icon, and here's the horizontal black version of the logo, and here's the vertical, you know, like you're doing, you're like rekeying all the different files. And yeah, I don't think any designer loves that portion of it, but most of it I love. You know, like anything creative, I love drawing and I like making, so I just feel like the good Lord made me to do it, so yeah, get excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Philip. Man, it's hot in this room. I'm like I need like a bandana or something to keep the sweat out of my eyes. I thought I had the AC on. I must not have turned it on properly or something. My goodness. Any other questions, you guys?
I tried my hand at typography, you know, creating typefaces, and I know it's quite a time-consuming, you know, thing to do. So I'm just wondering, how long does it take you to create, you know, so many characters for you know, the typefaces you create, the custom typefaces you create?
When I'm designing something like a single word or something, like if I'm just taking like something like the word Egan and I'm redesigning those characters, obviously it doesn't take that long, you know. But other than like taking in, like if I were to break that down and be like, okay, I've made these changes, how would I change the rest of the entire font and like update it? It takes a long time. It takes a really long time going through and creating an entire font. And not only just like, hey, I'm making the Illustrator version of it, but then if you're gonna like, you know, program the whole thing so that all the kerning comes out good out of the can and all that, it can be very complex. You can work with people, you can hire a partner, but that costs, you're giving away a lot of your profit at that point. So it's nice if you can do it on your own, especially if you're doing it for an internal project or just something for yourself for fun. Yeah, but actual timing, it depends. Like anything else, if you're creating it for yourself, like I created that font for myself, I knew what I wanted. I didn't make I made a couple of different versions. I tweaked and changed it, and I adjusted letters here and there, and I probably did the whole thing over a couple of weeks, which isn't very, very long whatsoever. But like if you were doing it for a client, you'd have to start broad, you know, like talk about like what types of, you know, overall styles, you know, like if you're basing it on icon, or you can make multiple versions and work your way, and you can spend a lot of time on a client project doing custom font for them. You know, they have teams of people working on that at big type studios. So
do you use GitLab or do you do them all or Font Lab, or do you do that stuff in Illustrator?
I usually hire a partner when I'm going to make it into a full-on font that's functional. If I'm doing it for myself and I only need to set, and I know I only have to set like a couple of headlines or something like that, or here and there, or I'm going to, you know, just set a few logos and I know what how I'm going to use the typography. You know, I might not even, you know, I might just like create all the characters and then just hand set them all. So it really depends, you know, like what the final use is going to be. If it's for a client, obviously, you know, I'll bring in a partner, and there's a bunch of people locally that do a great job. I've got friends who do it. I don't know if you guys know Riley Cran from Lost Type. He's a good dude. He does a lot of great marks, and you know, I know people from all over the country that are really great. Like you can basically, I could send them something and they could throw it together pretty quickly. Thanks.
Thanks.
Holy smokes.
Sorry, one quick one.
Absolutely.
You're not doing custom. Where do you look for typefaces if you're not? I mean, how do you choose those?
I always look for typefaces. So like when especially script faces, because scripts are, to find a good script, there's so many garbage ones out there. So anytime I'm going on a type foundry, anytime somebody launches a new font, or I'm working on a project and somebody's like, I might ask them, or if I have buddies who are designers, you know, I might ask them like, hey, what's the hot new sans serif that you've been working with, and I will save, like I have a bookmark folder on my Safari where it's like all fonts I want, but then I can always go back there like, okay, like so I want to do some custom, you know, I can dig in and I can be like, oh, you know, I really love this, you know, I have them usually categorized by sans serif, serif, and script. Slab serifs and stuff like that. So I can easily just kind of flip through them and find some ones that I really absolutely love. There's, I think having fonts that you love and every font that you love loaded on your machine versus having just like, when I first started out, it was just more like, hey, you got fonts? And people would be like, yeah, I've got 3, like, because everything used to be burned on discs or like zips. You'd be like, you know, like, here's a CD, I'll burn one for you with just all my fonts, and it's like 700 fonts, and most of them are garbage, you know. If you haven't done it, go through and just like sit there and spend some time and just load them all and go through them and get rid of all the garbage, so that when you're picking fonts and you're loading stuff up, that you don't have it on there. Another thing that I like to do is I'll put like all the fonts that I'm liking. Let's say I like 40 fonts or something at the time. And I'm liking these sans serifs and these ones and these ones, these ones. I will set up a file where I have all those like let's say the word tree or whatever it is, you know, all loaded up, uppercase, lowercase, all the way through. And then in every single one's in a different font. And then I can jump in that program quick with all my favorite ones, and I can do find and change, you know, like in Illustrator, you can do like find and change and like all the words that say tree and change it to whatever logo you're working on. You know, like I'm working on my Peters logo, I can put Peters and they all populate, and I can see what I can just glance around and see like, what does my logo look like in all the fonts that I like. Set up a file like that, it helps save a lot of time. And then you can quickly, like if you're trying a couple of different things, you can just like open up that file and like, I'll grab this one, or copy and paste all the ones you like, and do a new file, your logo file you're working on, and then you have all the fonts set up that you're digging, and you can easily just, you know, plug and play. It's a nice way to save yourself some time. I do that quite a bit. But in terms of just like overall foundries and stuff like that, obviously Hoffler is like the greatest. You know, they're so good, but it's so expensive. But there's so many good ones out there. The other thing I'll look for too is Hoffler, like typography.com. If you go to typography.com, it's you own that. But like it's like Gotham and like a Knockout and all these like excellent, like pretty much everything they make is amazing. But they're very expensive fonts. But that said, yeah, they make great fonts, but a lot of other great people are making fonts too, like Aonic or one of the things you can do, which is always nice, is when you see like new rebrands, like, oh, they're using, sometimes they'll say like what fonts they're using or specific, or like people call it on the comments. You can just kind of keep track of that. Be like, oh, look, they're using the font circular for the new Airbnb logo. That's one to keep in mind, like circular. I'll throw that in, I'll throw that one in there as new sans serif. That's better than, not better, but like it's different than Helvetica and Gotham, for using over and over again, like in Futura and all the sans serifs that like your go-tos. So that's, like doing that, and just like, even like with me, I work with a lot of different agencies. I work with a lot of in-house people and stuff like that. And so if they're using a font that I think is really cool, I'll just ask them what it is and be like, oh man, can I get a copy of that just to like play with it or try it out? And I get a lot of cool fonts that way too. So just accumulate them, put them together, get rid of the garbage ones as soon as you get them. Like if you don't like it, don't load it, unload it right away, and make sure that everything you have on your machine you're happy with, unless it's like a system font. You're stuck with it. So
Thank
hopefully it helps. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I just have a question. It's actually on a couple of your badges that you've created. Like for instance, like on the Denver one and the Frogtown, the way you've done the topography on that, how do you approach that? Is it like an effect that you've done to make like, because like how the Denver is sort of like a bow tie sort of shape.
Let me jump back.
And I'm just going off of your Instagram, so.
I know. I could probably pull up Instagram. I have them in here somewhere.
Yeah, I've just always been curious on how people create those effects.
The Denver one he's talking about is this one right here, if you can see my cursor. And the Frogtown one, I don't know if that is on here. I got the snake one on here. Frogtown. It doesn't matter. We can talk about the Denver one. How do I create that? So with that bow tie shape specifically, what I'm doing there is I'm picking a face that like this is Knockout by Hoffler. It's a condensed face that has it has a bold version, a light version, and then tons of different widths on how condensed or extended it is. Like it has a nice large variety. And so this is a bold one. I think it's condensed, and then I might have added some weight or tweaked it a little bit too on top of that, just to beef it up. I don't remember or recall off the top of my head. I made this one on an airplane flying out to a conference. And the way I did that is I drew my bow tie shape first, the shape that I wanted to fit it into, and then I always do it like snap to point. That's one of the things you can have. You can have like snap to grid or snap to point, and so that when I'm extending a line out, like if I'm extending a V, when I hit to the that shape that I've created, it just locks right in there. And so I'm trying to keep all my stroke widths the same, so I'm not extending something. I'm not stretching any of these. I'm just grabbing the points and I'm extending them to that, or pulling them down so they meet up right on with that. Now, some of the times that like a V is really easy, but like an E, all of a sudden you're like, hey, like I have this one angled this way and this one angled this way. An R gets really tricky because the negative space and there. So sometimes, especially when you get really complicated, I have a project on my website that I did for Esquire that's nothing but type and shape. And here, maybe I can. I don't want to screw up the screen sharing. I'm worried I'm gonna like shut the whole thing down. Anyhow, just because I use Zoom all the time, and I've used a bunch of these, but I've never used this one. This is my first time, and I just worried I'm hit the wrong thing. Anyhow, what was I gonna say? It's sometimes like I will redraw the whole top of the R. Basically, I'll chop off the top of the R and chop off the bottom of the R, or chop off the pieces of it and completely redraw them, like based off what the original ones are. So you have to redraw some typography. But in general, I'm just locking in. I'm trying to make sure that stroke stays the same width. The vertical strokes. I'm not stretching anything. Does that make sense? It'd be a lot easier if I was just like designing it like right now on screen, but
so like sometimes
it takes a long time to do it right.
Yeah, so sometimes you're actually manually like redrawing, but like the one next to that says like Badge Hunting Club from like the Chicago Badge Hunting Club. Yes. Are you doing similar thing with that as well?
No, because I don't for that. Well, no, that one is. sometimes there's a Seattle one. I wonder if that's on here. Yeah, this is Seattle one. This one, I'm selecting all the points on the top and extending them or like pulling them in, but I'm not stretching anything. I'm grabbing like all the points here and then pulling them out to a line. But if you can see, like the top of the T is still flat. So I'm right now I'm just changing. Basically, I'm just adjusting the height of each one of them, but keeping all the strokes consistent and making sure that they stay legible and that they look good. Because like right here, like it gets really tight in here, like this H and this U. So I usually start with the ones that are going to be the tightest, the hardest to read, and I try and make sure that those are going to look good. And then I extend out, and then I go like I work the opposite. So I work from smallest to largest.
So you're not necessarily relying on, because I know like in Illustrator, I don't know if it's Illustrator or InDesign, where they have those like filters or whatever where you can kind of do that to the text, because every time I've tried to do that, it always looks like really stupid.
When you do the effects, it tends to look kind of dumb, and that just happens. Because what it does is it's your stroke widths don't stay consistent, so all of a sudden you start getting some where they're like squished. The letters just look squished. They look bad. It's just like you never, like if you wanted to make a font more extended, you wouldn't just take it and squish it down because it's gonna look awful. Or if you want it more condensed, you're not gonna just stretch it vertically, because the same thing, you're gonna have issues with that. You don't want to keep the strokes consistent, so you're going to want to actually just kind of not redraw it, but you're going to want to keep all of them consistent by pulling, basically selecting different points and pulling them out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
That S on the hillside looks so tricky in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like well, it looks so long.
Yeah. That one, that is pretty hard to read. That one. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, I was doing these posters where I wanted to get some more badges in my portfolio, because like it's with any type of project, you get more work if you can show that you've done it before. It's like fake it till you make it type thing. And so I want to do, I really like doing badge work, and so I did a couple of these badge hunting posters that had, it was our crank posters, and they had all different bike gangs. I made little badges for these bike gangs, and then so I did 13 badges for each one of them, and I ended up doing 2 of them. So all of a sudden I had 28 badge logos in my portfolio, which it was a lot of work, but at the same time I was like, hey, now I got just a boatload of badges in here, and I started getting jobs and hired off that work, for like, hey, I want something similar to that, because I love making badges, and I like making that type of work. So like anything else is like, make the type of work and show the type of work that you want to do. Don't, if you made something, even if it's like really cool for like a big client, but you just don't like the way it turned out and you really don't want to make any more work like that, you might not want to put in your portfolio, even if you're like, wow, man, this is for like freaking Patagonia or something like that. If you don't like it, you're going to attract the wrong type of client. Yeah. All right, guys, it's I think we're pushing 3 hours. Any one last question? What do you guys got? Anything else? Am I putting you to sleep? I'm gonna fall asleep. Goodness, I'm an old man. I got little kids.
You know what? It's like 3 a.m. here. But I've had so many energy drinks that I'm just wired at the moment. So like,
right. Oh man, that's funny. Oh, I used to do that. I'd go when I went on road trips. I used to do energy drinks. I don't do it anymore, but I would do like licorice and energy drinks. That's like so bad for me.
No, but thank you.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for. Oh, you go ahead. Apologies.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Well, thanks.
Nerding out on a Saturday night.
Yeah, got pretty into the details there. Yeah, I had fun.
Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you for everybody for showing up. This is some great content. This is being recorded, so it'll be available to everyone once it's over. Allan, if you can send Matt your deck, so we can share it with everyone.
Cool.
This has been great. Do you have an email or anything that you want to share with anybody or no?
It's if if you go to my website, the email is right on there, and so is like it's on my Instagram account, and you can just click there. It says like email me, but it's Allan@allanpeters.com, spelled with a ALLAN, which is one of the most awkward spellings of Allan. I did a Google search of all the different ways you could spell it, and it's the least common way, so it made it easy to get the URL. But everybody always spells it wrong.
Well, I'd like to say thank you and enjoy your night.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks
Al.
for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Really good to
Thank
meet
you,
you all.
Allan.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Allan.
Thanks, guys.
Nice to meet you. Have a good night.
Yeah, reach out if you guys, if you have questions about stuff you're working on, your projects, just reach out. I'm happy to answer. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank
you.
you. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, Amy, Chris, yeah, all of you. Joey.
Oh, wait, I actually have one more question, Alan. It's
Yes.
not as much design related, but this is gonna be my second year in college. My first year, I was in political science and studying at Mankato,
Yeah.
and I chose to pursue design because I'd been doing it for so long, and decided, why not? And I really love it. I have an internship right now doing branding for a company in Kansas City. And I got accepted into the College of Design at the U of M Twin Cities.
Nice.
But I've probably only been to I can count the times on my hand I've been to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of wondering what are some of the best things to do, places to go, things to see, and living in Minneapolis.
Oh, Minneapolis is great. So U of M has a really good design school. That's switching from Mankato to U of M it's a good call. If I was to pick a design school to go to right now that was in near the Twin Cities, it'd be U of M or MCAD. MCAD costs a lot more. U of M, yeah, a lot of great designers have come out of there. 8-hour day. My buddy Nick Smazel, there's like Grant Ewell. I have so many friends that have gone there, and they say a lot of great things about it. I have fun things to do in the Twin Cities. Dude, it's jam-packed. It really kind of depends on like what you're into, like if you're like, hey, I'm into arcades, there's like places you can go. If you're like, hey, I'm into drinking, there's places to go. If you want to go hiking or walking or biking, there's great things to do. And I can suggest all sorts of things. Like right at the U of M, I love they're just jumping on the river there. If we're going for bike rides, you can bike to the city and go like right into town, like right over the Stone Arch Bridge. That's a beautiful way to get to bike into town. And then going the other way, you can go all the way down to like the Ford Bridge or like the down to the river bluffs. I went to school at a school that's not around anymore in St. Paul called College of Visual Arts, but I got to know St. Paul really good, and it's St. Paul is very, very cool as well. Like they're both unique cities. Minneapolis is much more like they tore everything down and put in new stuff, and St. Paul is older architecture. They held on to the stuff. Their infrastructure is a little bit more messed up. Like their streets are a lot more slippery in the winter, and they have a hard time like upkeeping that stuff. But it doesn't have the same nightlife and stuff like that. But it has like this really beautiful history. There's a lot of good antique stores. It's when you get a little bit further out as well around there.
I love that. That's where you get all those cool badges from.
Yeah, St. Paul's cool. I like it a lot. You're gonna find so many gems. It's hard to like if you're like, hey, what's a great place? I mean, like really depends on what you're into. Like we like I said earlier, like I've got a gluten allergy, and so like it's like and Maria doesn't eat dairy, and so like the amount of restaurants on our list of places we can even go to in the Twin Cities is like, hey, what of the 5 places we can eat at do you want to eat at, honey? So pretty minimal. But that said, if like these great parks, there's I grew up in the Twin Cities. I grew up in Minneapolis, actually, where I went to school not too far from like where all the riots and everything were happening. It's kind of sad to see how crazy that was in there, but it seems like everything's smoothed out. Still, the city's still there and stuff like that. As long as you're not going out down Lake Street, like most of it is intact, and it's a great city. So I don't know. I'm excited for you. You're gonna have a great time. Stay focused when you're in school. I don't know, like when some people they can easily get distracted. You sound like you're hyper focused. You're like interning and sophomore year.
Yeah,
out of state and stuff. So.
Yeah, the
I was
advisor
the same
said that
way.
was really unusual. So
No,
I
I was the
really
same way.
want to
College, man, I didn't party at all. I lived at home. I saved up money and just paid for as much school as I could and just worked my ass off in the summer doing like manual labor jobs, painting houses and siding and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
like
I
when I
work
was
at a
in
grocery
school,
store most of the time. So
yeah,
I get that.
I worked hard, man, and I got a job at like when I was in school where I could work night shifts at this it was an old person's home where I was in charge of making sure like crazy people didn't get in there, and then I would like check everybody in and just basically keeping them safe. I was at the front desk person. They had like like two sets of doors where it's like an airlock basically. I walk in, then I hit a button to open the other one, and then other than that, and then at night like a total of like 6 people might come in at a 55 and up home overnight from 11 o'clock until 7 in the morning. And so I could just I'd bring in like all my, like if I was working on fine arts, I'd bring in canvases and like set it up and I'd paint and I'd just have it like, I could do it, like I do all my homework and I just put my head down and get paid to make stuff. Oh, I mean, what I'm doing right now, except for it was schoolwork and I was getting paid to make sure crazy people didn't come in. It worked out really well. It was good for the job or for the producing good work.
Yeah,
and
that's good
key
time
thing
management.
though, when you're in school, don't worry as much about the grades. Worry about that final portfolio and getting that first job. I mean, you got a first job, but like getting that quality work and pushing it so that like that is the key thing. That when you get out of school, the degree is important. Nobody's gonna be like, well, what was your GPA? They're going to look at your work and they're going to see the quality of it. So make sure that your work is just as good as it possibly can be. And like when I was in college, I did the same thing where I was at a different major. I was going to major in drawing of all things, which I don't know how you make a living doing that at first. And I was like, oh, hey, look, I can make a living designing. I'm going to do that. That seems like that is actually, I'm going to have a future with that. So I switched sophomore year to graphic design and I felt like I was behind, so I took like all my design classes really fast, and instead of like spacing them out, and I got done with all my design courses like halfway through my junior year, and so I was just like liberal arts and history classes and stuff like that after that, and I got down to my portfolio class, and like right at the end they had like we had to have these check-ins where they're like you show your portfolio and they're like they kind of interview you. And so I laid all my stuff and I had like gotten a car accident that day and I was in just a kind of a gruff mood and I was presenting the work. I did kind of a poor job presenting it and the work wasn't top notch or super quality. And they're like, man, I would not hire you. Your work sucks. Like, and your like attitude it's awful. Like they just like burned me completely. And it was good. It was like the best thing that happened to me because I went back my senior year and I took every single project and I learned so much because when you're working on something for a year, like those first couple of years, you're evolving so quickly and you're learning so much, just like a baby. Think how much they learn in that first year of like they're learning to walk, they're learning language, they're learning all these things in the first couple of years. And it's the same kind of thing when you're learning this from scratch, you're evolving so quickly. So then like going back and I redid my whole portfolio. I took all the same projects and I look at them with the new lens, like how could I make this better? How could I make this into something that honestly, that like, what would I really like? Like what taste value, like how can I make this something that other people want then that I like making? And my senior year was just grueling. Like I killed myself like redoing all that work, but I got out of school and I got the first job I went after out of college and like I kept that work ethic all the way through. And it's helped my career, just like putting in the work, working hard, keep my head down and always trying to like keep growing and evolving and pushing my work, not letting it be like, well, it's good enough, just always like, how do I make this better? How can I push it?
Right.
Like trying to give my clients the best damn thing they can get. Because like I said earlier, like if it's not good, I'm not going to get another job. Like I put the work out there and people are going to see it and they're just, it's right now it's like people are basically voting on your work. You put it on Instagram, you put it on Twitter, like you're getting likes, you're getting comments, or you're not. And whether you want to lie about like whether you think your work is good or not, they're going to tell you. These people are going to tell you, and you're going to see all the stats, and you're going to see if it needs improvement or if it doesn't. And and you got to push it, man. You got to keep your head down and work hard in this game.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And if you make something that any part of you knows could be better, then you can't stop.
Yeah.
That's how I feel when I make something.
Yeah.
Like I can't stop until I'm perfectly confident in it, and I love it in every way, and I don't see a flaw with it. And then I can't stop until it's that way, you know. I know you understand that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to make it as good as you can.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes you see a flaw and like you feel like you're like done with it, and you'll see this like one thing, this one glaring thing, and you know it's like a ton of work to fix it. And you're just like, shit. Like you got to go back, you got to go completely like scratch the whole thing, and like you got to explore it and see if it works.
I changed my personal logo 3 times in the past 2 days. Like I made something, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Wait, I actually hate that.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll get there. You'll get the one you like. It always happens.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So you guys, thank you for your time. Obviously, you know, like you guys are following Making Midwest. If you aren't following me on Instagram, I'm at Allan Peters, same on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. Hit me up on Behance. I'm on there. I got all the social media things. I on my site, you can check out the / shop. Like basically, if you just click on the shop button, I'm at PetersDesignCompany.com. I got like 70 products. I got all face masks, and hats, and all sorts of cool stuff. Eagles, freaking Eagles, man. How can that be good? It's got all that stuff on there. Yeah. I mean, funny, I keep looking over here because I got like stacks of stuff, like in case there are questions about like book recommendation, or like I forgot, like I was like, in case I need to grab something, I've got my big stack. But it's getting late. I'm gonna let you guys get some sleep, and I'm gonna go tuck my kids into bed. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much again for this. This is awesome.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming and listening. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right.